Chapter 1080. To be honest, Su Zimo did not care about these titles at the moment. At the very least, the number 1 of the Jean Dan Phenomenon ranking would receive generous rewards. However, there was nothing for the Hidden Dragon ranking and Heavenly Dragon ranking. They would only attract continuous challenges from other dragons. Su Zimo only wanted to cultivate quietly among the dragons. After entering the Dharma characteristic realm and receiving the baptism of the ancestral dragon divine pillar, his innate divine powers were awakened. Chaos had already appeared in Tianhuang mainland, and many signs indicated that there might be a massive change in the future. The only way to survive the upcoming changes was to raise his strength as soon as possible. However, the tree wanted peace, but the wind did not stop. Right now, it was impossible for him to stay out of it. Not far away, a man in scarlet brocade robes walked over slowly with an extraordinary aura. The moment he arrived, the surrounding illumination dragons dispersed instinctively and opened up a path. Although this illumination dragon was also at the void reversion realm, it was clear that he had a high status in the illumination dragon lineage and was extremely dignified. Brother Yi is here. Let's see if Long Mo can still be arrogant this time round. Many illumination dragons looked at Su Zimo with gloating expressions. The brocade-robed man arrived and frowned as he looked at the illumination dragon on the ground, who was screaming with a severed arm and an unconscious clansman. The brocade-robed man looked at Su Zimo. Su Zimo looked back calmly, with a calm expression. Unlike the other illumination dragons, the brocade-robed man did not reveal great hostility towards Su Zimo. Instead, he cupped his fists slightly and said in a deep voice, "I'm Long Yi." Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. He had seen Long Yi's name on the Hidden Dragon ranking before. He seemed to be ranked 5th. Su Zimo nodded and returned the greeting with cupped fists. "I've heard of you. You've just arrived at the dragons, and it's normal for you to be ostracized by your clansmen," Long Yi said indifferently. "I have some status among the dragons. How about this? Apologize to these 2 clansmen, and we'll forget about today's matter." Many illumination dragons protested when they heard that. "Brother Yi, this kid is too arrogant." "That's right. He's only been here for a month, and he went to the mixed blood dragons to show off. When he came back, he injured 2 of our clansmen. We can't just let this go. Brother Yi, go and extinguish his arrogance, lest he overestimates himself." Long Yi stretched out his hands and pressed down. The voices of the dragons gradually died down. Long Yi said, "Everyone, give me some face. As long as he is willing to sincerely apologize, don't make things difficult for him today." Some of the illumination dragons stopped talking, but they still looked at Su Zimo with hostility, feeling indignant. "Long Mo, help the 2 of them up. Apologize, and this matter will be over." Long Yi seemed to be ordering Su Zimo around. Su Zimo suddenly laughed. Long Yi seemed to be helping him and doing him a favor, but in reality, this request was completely unreasonable. There had never been a case where the winner had to apologize to the loser in a battle between the dragon race. At the end of the day, Long Yi did not treat him as a dragon. Or rather, he was only flaunting his might among the dragons, including to an outsider like him. "Why should I apologize?" Su Zimo looked at Long Yi with a fake smile and asked instead. Long Yi turned his head slightly, as though this was the first time he was meeting Su Zimo. With a whoosh, 2 balls of flames burned in his eyes. "He really doesn't know what's good for him. Brother Yi, he doesn't want face. Teach him a lesson. There's no need to use a sledgehammer to kill a chicken. Let me do it." Behind Long Yi, an illumination dragon could not hold back and charged out, prepared to fight Su Zimo. Long Yi reached out and stopped the illumination dragon. He glared at Su Zimo and said faintly, "Long Mo, do you know who you're talking to?"
"Why?"
Su Zimo smiled gently. "Is there a rule among dragons that the strong have to apologize to the weak?" Long Yi smiled as well. However, everyone could sense that his smile carried a wisp of suppressed rage. "You're merely an outsider. I only gave you this chance because I think highly of you. Since you don't want it, don't blame me." The flames in Long Yi's eyes burned brighter. Seems like they were right. You truly don't know your place. Today, I'll teach you a lesson. Among dragons, be more mindful. You can't afford to offend anyone. Before he finished his sentence, Long Yi strode forward and raised his arm, smashing down on Su Zimo's head.
Swoosh.
That arm was like a steel whip and howled over with a sharp wind. Su Zimo narrowed his eyes slightly. As the fifth on the hidden dragon ranking, Long Yi was indeed not weak. The power he released was rather terrifying. Of course, that power could not threaten him. Su Zimo punched in reverse towards Long Yi's fist.
Bang.
The fists collided. Su Zimo was motionless, and his expression was normal. However, Long Yi shuddered. He felt an intense pain surge into his body from his fist. He almost could not hold it in, and cried out in pain. It was only at this moment that he realized that Su Zimo was even stronger than he had imagined.
Splash.
Long Yi channeled his bloodline, and the sound of a tsunami echoed from his body. The power of his bloodline flowed through his limbs and bones, and the pain from his fist was mostly resolved. Tsunami blood. He had encountered a dragon who had cultivated his bloodline to the tsunami level so quickly. It was definitely not a fluke that Long Yi was able to enter the hidden dragon ranking.
Come on.
Long Yi's gaze intensified as he roared, "I'll show you my true strength." Long Yi strode forward once more and charged toward Su Zimo. Rumble.
Boom.
Su Zimo stood on the spot and channeled his bloodline. The sound of a tsunami echoed from his body as well. It was even deeper and more majestic than Long Yi's bloodline. A commotion broke out among the dragons. Although the pure bloodline of dragons flowed through their bodies and they were strong in combat, most of them had not cultivated to the tsunami blood realm. To think that this outsider with an impure bloodline would have cultivated to the tsunami blood realm.
Boom.
The two of them collided heavily like two ferocious beasts in human form. Flesh collided against flesh and bones against bones. Blood chi surged and let out a series of chilling sounds. Immediately after, under countless gazes, a figure was sent flying. It was Long Yi, number 5 on the hidden dragon ranking. Long Yi crawled up from the ground swiftly. This bit of injury was negligible to him. However, this loss had already enraged him completely. Roar. Long Yi roared towards Su Zimo and charged forward once more.
Bang. Bang. Bang.
The two of them collided repeatedly and clashed head-on. There was no technique, and it was a pure fight of strength. Long Yi fell and stood up time and time again. The dragon blood in his body circulated, and some superficial injuries did not affect him much. However, the scene before them left the dragons dumbfounded. Nobody expected Su Zimo to be able to fight against Long Yi. Less than that, the dragons did not expect Long Yi to be completely disadvantaged in this battle. Chapter 1081. Long Mo's bloodline is impure, but his melee combat strength is indeed strong. However, melee combat is only a part of one's combat strength. Long Mo is still far from being able to defeat Brother Yi. That's right. As long as Brother Yi uses the secret skill of our Illumination Dragon lineage, victory will be decided immediately. Many Illumination Dragons discuss softly. The secret skill of the Illumination Dragon lineage was the Illumination Dragon Eye. This secret skill was extremely difficult to cultivate and was extremely dangerous. Even in the Illumination Dragon lineage, very few people could cultivate it successfully. If one could cultivate the Illumination Dragon Eye, their combat strength would at least double. In the middle of close combat, the sudden outburst of an eye technique, and such a terrifying eye technique at that, was almost destructive. Even if the other party could defend against it, they would definitely exhaust their blood chi and be flustered. They would not be able to defend against the subsequent attacks. Long Yi charged forward repeatedly, but was repelled by Su Zimo repeatedly. The anger in his heart burned even more fiercely.
Roar.
Long Yi reared his head and roared into the skies, releasing a loud dragon roar. A series of crackling sounds came from his body and his body expanded. He had already transformed into his half-dragon form. The wounds on Long Yi's body healed at a visible speed. After transforming into a half-dragon, his speed and strength increased exponentially to an even more terrifying level. Su Zimo was still motionless and had no intention of transforming into a dragon. His scarlet hair danced like burning flames, and his eyes shone brightly. Long Yi charged forward once more and threw out a punch. Su Zimo was fearless and did not dodge at all. Striding forward, he threw a punch forward.
Boom.
The fists collided with a deafening bang. A huge air current spread in all directions, and heat waves surged. Even after transforming into a half-dragon, Long Yi could not gain the upper hand. Instantly, Long Yi realized that he was definitely not a match for Long Mo in melee combat. However, there was no hint of panic in his eyes. Instead, a bedazzling light lit up in his right eye like a blazing sun. Suddenly, a beam of light shot towards Su Zimo's head. Illumination Dragon Eye. A series of exclamations sounded from the dragons. Many of the Illumination Dragons looked excited. This secret technique was the pride of the Candle Dragons. The release of the Illumination Dragon Eye meant that the outcome was decided. Long Yi was able to sit at the 5th place of the Hidden Dragon role, not by relying on his close combat strength, but by relying on his Dao ocular technique. However, right after, when the dragons saw the other side, their expressions froze on their faces. Instantly, they were speechless and widened their eyes in disbelief. At the same time that Long Yi released the Torch Dragon Eye, Su Zimo's right eye also released a blazing beam of light. Furthermore, this beam of light had an additional layer of sharpness compared to Long Ye's beam of light, as if it could cut and tear apart everything. Torch Dragon's Eye. The dragons were dumbfounded. Long Mo was only an outsider who did not have the time or opportunity to cultivate among the dragons. How could he know about the Torch Dragon Eye? Every Torch Dragon knew how difficult it was to cultivate this mystic technique. However, this outsider with an impure bloodline had succeeded in cultivating it. What was even more terrifying was that this outsider's Illumination Dragon Eye seemed to be even stronger than Long Ye's. How is this possible?
Boom.
The sound produced by the clash of ocular techniques was even more terrifying. 2 pillars of light shattered. Long Yi shrieked tragically. Blood seeped out of his right eye. Although he was not blind, it still looked terrifying. Among the dragons, no one knew that Su Zimo's Illumination Dragon Eye was not only the secret skill of the Torch Dragons, but also a Illumination Stone. The Illumination Stone transformed into a set of flying swords and released the Illumination Sword formation. Long Ye's Illumination Dragon Eye was no match for the combination of the 2 powers. Of course, the power of Long Ye's ocular technique was already rather terrifying. If this was in the cultivation world, even the Dharma Daojuan's eyes would be pierced by that attack. Long Mo, how dare you hurt me? Long Yi lunged forward once more with a menacing expression. His glabella shone, and an incomparably powerful spirit consciousness attack burst forth. Essence spirit secret skills were not allowed in the habitat of the dragons. That was because once an Essence Spirit secret skill was released, it was difficult to stop it, and it was easy for one to die in an irreversible situation. However, dragons could release spirit consciousness attacks in a fight. That was Long Ye's final trump card. He did not believe that the strength of his spirit consciousness could not compare to an outsider who had just entered the Void Reversion Realm after cultivating for so many years and reaching the perfected Void Reversion Realm. However, he did not realize what sort of opponent he was facing. Although Su Zimo had just entered the Void Reversion Realm, he cultivated the cultivation technique left behind by Dayu. Even if he had just entered the Void Reversion Realm and condensed a Yang spirit, he was not someone Long Yi could deal with. Scram! Su Zimo revealed a hint of impatience when he saw Long Yi lunge forward once more. He condensed his spirit consciousness and counterattacked. If Long Ye's spirit consciousness was like a surging river, the spirit consciousness that burst forth from Su Zimo was like a raging tsunami.
Boom.
The 2 spirit consciousnesses collided. Long Ye's expression changed in shock as he grunted. Blood drained from his face, and he felt a sharp pain in his mind. almost fainting. In that moment of distraction, Su Zimo had already closed in and punched him in the chest.
Bang.
A terrifying power surged into his body. Long Yi could clearly feel that his chest had been shattered, and his heart had stopped beating for a moment. He felt the world spin, and he was sent flying far away. Finally, he slammed heavily onto the ground with pain all over his body. He had lost. He was dragged down from the hidden dragon ranking by an outsider, just like that. Long Yi lay in the mud and looked at the gray skies with a dim gaze. Up till this point of his cultivation, he had fought countless times with his clansmen and lost countless times as well. However, this time round, the blow to him was way too great. Brother Yi, are you alright? Many torched dragons ran over with worried expressions. When these voices landed in his ears, they seemed to be extremely far away. Heis. Long Yi sighed gently and closed his eyes. His emotions were complicated, and he could not tell if he was happy or worried. It was sad to be defeated. However, he knew one thing. From this day forth, the Illumination Dragon lineage was going to rise. The two torch dragons carried Long Yi and quickly ran to the back, preparing to find someone to treat Long Yi's injuries. However, the surrounding dragons did not disperse for a long time. Many Illumination dragons looked at Su Zimo with reverence. At that moment, none of the Illumination dragons jumped out and accused Su Zimo of being an outsider. There were no more Illumination dragons berating him for being a bastard with an impure bloodline. As Long Yen had said, strength reigned supreme among dragons. If he wanted to gain a foothold here and obtain the respect and recognition of the dragons, he could only rely on his own fists. In the central square, a change happened on the gigantic Hidden Dragon ranking. The fifth row of the Hidden Dragon ranking, Long Yi, Illumination Dragon, suddenly moved down a row. Many dragons would gather in the central square every day. The change in the Hidden Dragon ranking attracted the gazes of many dragons. The fifth row of the Hidden Dragon ranking has changed hands? Who defeated Long Yi? Could it be Long Shi? I heard that she just went to Illumination Dragon. Just as the dragons were discussing, 4 words appeared on the fifth row of the Hidden Dragon ranking that had disappeared. Long Mo, Illumination Dragon. Chapter 1082. Long Mo? When did such an incredible person appear in the Illumination Dragon lineage? Why haven't I heard of him before? Someone looked confused. Strange. Why do I find this Long Mo familiar? The dragons pointed at the Hidden Dragon ranking and discussed fervently. Suddenly, an exclamation sounded from the dragons. I've got it. A dragon said, this Long Mo is the outsider who joined the Illumination Dragon lineage a month ago. It's him. He seems to have caused a huge ruckus at the mixed dragon side. To think that he would have such combat strength to defeat Long Yi. I heard that the elders of the Illumination Dragon lineage are interested in matchmaking him and Long Shi. Long Shi has already charged over. Her nickname is the Tyrant Dragon. How can she tolerate something as such? Long Mo should be prepared to suffer. Someone gloated. That's not right. Right then, a dragon pointed at the ranking on the Hidden Dragon ranking and said, Long Shi is ranked 8th on the Hidden Dragon ranking. She seems to be below Long Mo. It was only at this moment that the dragons realized that there was a change in the Hidden Dragon ranking. Long Mo's combat strength was even stronger than Long Shi's. Now, the consequences of Long Shi charging over. The dragons exchanged glances and ran towards the Illumination Dragon's habitat tacitly. After defeating Long Yi, Su Zimo looked at the respectful gazes of the dragons and finally relaxed.
This was good as well.
He did not have to fight them one by one. Suppressing the 5th on the Hidden Dragon ranking could be considered as solving the problem once and for all, and saving him a lot of trouble. He was about to find a random dragon and ask where his lair was when there was a commotion behind him. Where's Long Mo? A deafening voice sounded, causing Su Zimo's eardrums to ache. Normally speaking, the Illumination Dragon was of the fire attribute and the temperature of its habitat was extremely high. However, at that moment, the surrounding temperature plummeted. When the surrounding dragons saw who it was, their expressions changed, and they retreated instinctively. Su Zimo frowned and turned around. Not far away, a few members of the dragon tribe rushed over in a menacing manner. Their leader was a young lady. She wore a tight white robe that perfectly outlined her tall and curvaceous figure. This woman's face was fair, and her facial features were well-defined. When put together, it was filled with a different kind of beauty. The twin peaks in front of her chest were very majestic and magnificent, as if they were about to burst out at any moment. "Who is Long Mo?" "Step forward." As she approached, the woman suddenly opened her mouth and roared. This woman was definitely a beauty. However, his voice was truly frightening. At the very least, Su Zimo was shocked when he was caught off guard. At this moment, the dragons were scattered all around, and Su Zimo was standing in the middle of the field, appearing extremely out of place. The woman turned her gaze and immediately saw Su Zimo. She took 3 large steps forward and arrived in front of him. The woman was half a head taller than Su Zimo. "Tell me where Long Mo is." Under close observation, the woman's eyes were deep and profound. Her eyes were like 2 sapphires, shining brightly. Su Zimo felt his head ache. This dragon before him clearly did not belong to the Illumination dragon lineage. Based on the discussions around him, it seemed like this woman was from the hornless dragon lineage. He had just arrived at the Dragonbone Valley and came out of the primordial divine spring. He truly did not know how he was related to this woman from the Empress Dragons. Su Zimo could tell that this woman did not have good intentions. However, he still smiled gently. "I'm Long Mo, you ours?" The woman was stunned. A hint of shock flashed through her gem-like eyes, and she looked a little adorable. It was completely different from her fierce appearance just now. However, the woman reacted quickly. Clenching her fists, she twisted her neck and grit her teeth. "All right, how dare you?" Su Zimo was confused. He did not know why he was so bold. Could it be that just now Long Yi was the Dao companion of this beauty from the Empress Dragons? Because he had beaten Long Yi up, his wife had come knocking on his door? "You're Long Yi's Dao companion?" Su Zimo tried asking. A suppressed laughter sounded from the dragons. Long Mo is in trouble now. To think that he would dare to tease a tyrant dragon like this. How ferocious. Many dragons had gloating expressions on their faces.
Keep pretending.
Keep pretending. The woman from the Empress Dragons gritted her white teeth, and her eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of ice, as she said coldly, "How dare you propose marriage to me, you outsider with an impure bloodline? You must have a death wish." Marriage proposal? Su Zimo was stunned. He had just come out of the primordial divine spring. What marriage was he talking about? Suddenly, the woman from the Empress Dragons opened her mouth and spat out a white aura at Su Zimo. The surrounding temperature plummeted, and a layer of frost even formed on the ground. Dragon breath. It was an ability that every dragon was born with. Of course, the power of different dragons' dragon breaths was different as well. The dragon breath of this woman from the Empress Dragons was frost. While Su Zimo was in a daze, the woman from the Empress Dragons opened her mouth and exhaled at him. The fragrance assaulted him. Immediately after, his head, scarlet hair, face, body, and limbs were shrouded in a layer of frost. Thereafter, it froze into ice at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo had already vanished, and a human-shaped ice sculpture appeared on the spot. He's in trouble now. His organs will be severely injured after being frozen by the tyrant dragon's dragon breath. I reckon he won't be able to recover without half a month. The dragons discussed among themselves, but none of them showed any sympathy. Humph. The woman from the Empress Dragons knocked the ice sculpture in front of her gently and sneered, "I'll let you continue pretending. This is just a little pain for you."
Crack. Crack.
Right at this moment, a series of cracking sounds suddenly rang out in the void. The woman from the Empress Dragons was stunned. Immediately after, right in front of countless gazes, a crack appeared on the human-shaped ice sculpture and expanded rapidly. In the blink of an eye, it filled the entire ice sculpture.
Boom.
There was a deafening sound. A figure walked out with surging blood chi and scarlet hair that resembled flames. He exuded a torrential aura and glared at the woman from the Empress Dragons with a burning gaze. Psst! The dragon sucked in a breath of cold air. He was fine even after being struck by the Empress Dragon's dragon breath. The woman from the Empress Dragons reacted quickly, and her blood chi surged with a cold aura. Suddenly, she charged towards Su Zimo.
Bang!
Although the woman from the Empress Dragons charged quickly, she retreated even faster. The moment she charged forward, she was punched back by Su Zimo. The woman from the Empress Dragons rolled a few times on the ground and stood up before Long. Panting slightly, she grit her teeth and said, "How dare you hit me?" Before she could finish her sentence, her vision blurred and a scarlet shadow flashed. She was sent flying once more and slammed heavily onto the ground with a bang. Roar! The woman from the Empress Dragons was enraged and roared. A series of crackling sounds could be heard from her body as her body expanded. The woman's clothes burst open and silver-white dragon scales appeared on her body. They were like sparkling snowflakes that lined up tightly together. Chapter 1083. As the proud daughter of dragons, Long Shi had a fiery personality. Coupled with her strong combat strength, she was fearless in the Dragon Bone Valley, and almost no one dared to provoke her. She was about to break through to the Dharma characteristic realm. To think that she would be suppressed by an outsider. Furthermore, this outsider dared to tease her openly. She did not care about the marriage agreement. Her husband had to become an unprecedented five-clawed divine dragon, like the heavenly dragon ranking #1, Long Song. Who did this outsider think he was? Dragonification. Without hesitation, Long Shi transformed into her half-dragon form and prepared to tear the outsider not far away into shreds. Su Zimo did not give Long Shi much time to react at all. He strode forward and reached out, slapping her back heavily. Under normal circumstances, that palm should have landed on Long Shi's back. However, in her half-dragon form, her body expanded and elongated. Su Zimo's palm was no longer on Long Shi's back, but her round and voluptuous buttocks. This change happened in an instant. By the time Su Zimo realized it, it was already too late, and he hurriedly retracted his strength.
Piak.
Indeed, Su Zimo had retracted most of his strength. However, his palm could not help but land on Long Shi's buttocks with a crisp sound that was neither light nor heavy. Her flesh trembled. Instantly, the entire battlefield fell silent. Many dragons were dumbfounded. Heavens, what did Long Imo do? He's actually slapping the tyrant dragon's buttocks. Is that a slap? He's clearly touching. The dragons roared furiously in their hearts. Long Shi had just transformed into a half-dragon when she suffered such a blow. Her entire body immediately became extremely stiff, and with a whoosh, a blush appeared on her fair face. Su Zimo sighed internally with a helpless expression. He could even hear Long Shi gritting her teeth. This was a huge misunderstanding. There was no possibility of an explanation. Could he say that he accidentally slapped her buttocks? That explanation would only cause the female dragon to go berserk. "I'm going to kill you." A few words popped out from between Long Shi's teeth. Her tone was cold, and the surrounding temperature had already dropped to a freezing point. She had never suffered such humiliation before. Long Shi's vital energy and blood surged as she struggled to stand up and fight Su Zimo to the death. Su Zimo was thinking about how to deal with the situation in front of him when he felt Long Shi's movements. His hand, which had not been retracted in time, instinctively pressed down.
Pa.
Long Shi had just gotten up when that despicable palm landed on her, but again.
Plop.
This time, she was directly pressed to the ground, unable to move at all. The dragons were in an uproar. Long Imo actually touched it again. Long Shi looked embarrassed and angry. Su Zimo cursed in his heart. His palm moved and landed on the back of Long Shi's head. With a light pat, he knocked her unconscious. No matter what, he had to knock this female dragon out first. The blood in Long Shi's body gradually calmed down. The silver-white scales on her body were also gradually disappearing. Long Shi's clothes were already torn and her dragon scales faded, revealing her fair skin that shone with a charming luster. A slender and perfect body was about to be exposed to the dragons.
Gulp. Gulp.
The sound of gulping could be heard from the dragons. Countless dragons widened their eyes, ready to feast their eyes on the scene. All of a sudden, a piece of clothing covered her perfect body.
Ugh.
A sigh sounded from the dragons at the same time, looking rather spectacular. Su Zimo had taken out his shirt in time to cover Long Shi, who was almost exposed. The dragons glared. Although the dragons were angry, they could not say anything. Su Zimo stood up and looked at the few hornless dragons not far away. He cupped his fists. I'm sorry. Just now, I was a little rude. There should be some misunderstanding here. Miss, please help me take care of her. The few hornless dragons were slightly stunned. They were all dragons and had never heard such a refined tone. One of the hornless dragons was the first to react when he heard Su Zimo's interesting words. He pursed his lips and smiled. Actually, logically speaking, you're not considered rude. That's right, that's right. Another hornless dragon smiled. Given your relationship, it's fine to touch her casually. However, don't do it in front of so many people next time. Hee hee. The other hornless dragons giggled as well. Nobody noticed that Long Shi, who was sprawled on the ground motionlessly, blushed even more shyly. Su Zimo rubbed his forehead gently. There was no way he could explain this matter clearly. Let's go. The few hornless dragons helped Long Shi up and waved to Su Zimo with a much better attitude than before. Su Zimo was still confused, not understanding how he was related to this woman from the hornless dragon race. After pondering for a while, he could not figure it out. He was prepared to throw this matter to the back of his mind and cultivate first. As soon as he turned around, a dragon immediately came up to him and gave him a thumbs up. Brother Amo, my name is Long Can. You can call me Can. The illumination dragon named Long Can was very enthusiastic. Brother Amo, I know where your dragon lair is. I'll bring you there. All right. Su Zimo was momentarily stunned before nodding. Prior to this, none of the dragons bothered with him when he asked continuously. But now, before he could ask, a dragon had already stepped forward. It was true that strength reigned supreme among dragons. Su Zimo thought that it was because he defeated Long Yi, who was 5th on the hidden dragon ranking, that he obtained the recognition of the dragons. However, in reality, the true reason why he obtained the recognition of the dragons was because he touched Long Shi's buttocks. And it was twice. In the eyes of the dragons, this was much more impressive than the hidden dragon ranking. Su Zimo followed Long Can forward, and many dragons looked at him with admiration. Some dragons even took the initiative to greet him and gave him a thumbs up. Just now, who is that hornless dragon? What has it got to do with me? After a moment, Su Zimo could not help but ask, Brother Mo, you really don't know? Long Can asked. When he saw Su Zimo shake his head, Long Can explained, Sister, she was originally engaged to Brother Yen before she was born. However, after she grew up, Sister Shi's temper was too explosive and the two of them did not like each other. At that time, they caused a huge fuss and parted on bad terms. Hence, the matter was left unsettled. Naturally, Long Yen was the child of the red-headed ghost. Long Ken continued, Brother Amo, the reason why you came to our Candle Dragons was to replace Brother Yen. The elders went to the Candle Dragons to propose marriage again. Given Sister Shi's pride, she naturally wouldn't agree and charged over to teach you a lesson. To think that he. At that point, Long Shi winked at Su Zimo and smiled. Brother Amo, if you can subdue Sister Shi, our Candle Dragons will definitely acknowledge you as their young master. Don't be fooled by Sister Shi's temper. She's a nice person. Long can even put in a good word for Long Shi. At that point, Su Zimo had already reacted. Clenching his fists slightly, he gritted his teeth. Those old fogies. Initially, this trouble had nothing to do with him. It was the elders of the Candle Dragons who went to propose marriage that provoked the tyrant dragon. Chapter 1084. This matter was probably not over yet. Suzimo did not intend to think about it anymore. As long as he returned to his dragon lair, Longshi would not be able to barge in even if she came knocking. Suzimo said in a low voice, "By the way, where are the cultivation techniques of our Illumination dragon lineage? I intend to take a look." "Follow me." Longkan led Suzimo forward and arrived in front of a hall. After passing through the inspection of the two guards at the entrance of the hall, the two of them entered. The hall was not big, and there were not many cultivation technique secret manuals inside. There were not even as many as Misty Peak cultivation techniques. For a race like dragons, even if they did not cultivate any cultivation techniques, their strength would continue to rise as they aged. Cultivation techniques were only supplementary for dragons. Suzimo was not interested in the cultivation techniques of dragons either. Even the top cultivation techniques of dragons could not compare to the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. His only motive for coming here was to decipher the mysteries of the Barondermic art and essence spirit secret skill in the Yang spirit section. After flipping through a few ancient books casually, Suzimo's eyes lit up. Indeed,
It was as he had guessed.
the ancient and strange symbols in the Barondermic art and essence spirit secret skill were actually the words of dragons. Suzimo did not understand the words of dragons and naturally could not understand the mysteries within. After confirming that, he copied some of the most basic ancient books in the hall and tried his best to learn the words of dragons as soon as possible so that he could cultivate Baron and the essence spirit secret skill. Suzimo left the hall and bade farewell to Longkan. He returned to his dragon lair and entered seclusion cultivation. At the same time, news of the two battles in the Illumination Dragon's lair spread through the entire Dragonbone Valley at the fastest speed. Normally speaking, Long Ye's defeat would be the focus of attention since he was ranked 5th on the Hidden Dragon ranking. However, in the following period of time, the dragons were mostly discussing the battle between Suzimo and Longshi. Almost no one cared if Long Yi was ranked 5th or 6th on the Hidden Dragon ranking. Blue Dragon's Lair.
What?
An azure dragon frowned slightly. His eyes were filled with anger as he said coldly, "Someone dares to bully Longshi? Brother Long Yang, I heard that the newcomer Long Mo not only bullied Sister Shi, but he also spanked her." Another blue dragon said softly. The blue dragon called Long Yang had a slender figure and a head of long green hair. His face was soft and his facial features were exquisite. Although he was a man, he was even more beautiful than a woman. If Long Yang were to dress as a woman, he would probably be inferior to Long Shi. "You really don't know what death is." Long Yang stood up slowly and walked out. A gentle look flashed through his eyes as he whispered, "I have to go and comfort Sister Long Shi. She's impatient and is probably going to explode from anger." Before long, Long Yang arrived at the hornless dragon lineage. As soon as he arrived outside Long Shi's residence, he heard low growls coming from inside. Very quickly, a few hornless dragons walked out with disheveled expressions and were scolded badly by the angry Long Shi. "Sister Long Shi, it's me." Long Yang stood outside the cave and said gently, "I heard that someone bullied you, so I came to see you." Thud, thud. A series of heavy footsteps sounded. Before long, Long Shi's figure appeared outside the cave. A dazzling smile appeared on Long Yang's face. Long Shi glared fiercely at Long Yang with bloodshot eyes. She gritted her teeth and said, "Get lost, you sissy." The smile on Long Yang's face froze. There were many hornless dragons patrolling the vicinity. When they heard that, the hornless dragons grimaced and were secretly shocked. Long Yang was a man, but he was even more beautiful than a woman. Coupled with his gentle voice, there were many people who bullied him and called him a sissy since he was young. However, later on, no one dared to say those words in front of Long Yang anymore. As Long Yang grew up, he endured many humiliation and cultivated continuously while fighting against others. Although he became more beautiful, his strength also increased. Right now, he was already the number one of the hidden dragon ranking. In the Dragon Bone Valley, apart from Long Shi, almost all the void reversion dragons were taught a lesson by him, be it men or women.
That was Long Shi.
If it was any other dragon, they would be skinned if they dared to say those words, even if they did not die. Long Yang was silent for a moment before he suddenly smiled. Sister Long Shi, I know that you're angry. However, don't worry, I'll teach that Long Mo a lesson for you.
I don't need you.
Long Shi harumphed coldly. This is my own matter. I'll handle it myself. Long Yang, you're even prettier than me. Why are you always pestering me? Don't bother me anymore. Long Shi cursed angrily and turned to walk into the cave. Long Yang was not annoyed. He lowered his head slightly and smiled gently, murmuring softly, Sister Long Shi, don't be angry. I'll bring Long Mo's head to see you and let you vent your anger. Although Long Yang was smiling, a sinister killing intent flashed through his eyes. Impure bloodline, outsider. Even if I kill him, it's nothing much. Long Yang sneered and shook his head before turning to leave. Su Zimo, who was cultivating in his dragon lair, naturally did not know that he had made a mortal enemy for no reason after arriving at the dragon's world for just over a month. Furthermore, he had yet to meet this person. Or rather, even if he knew, he would not care. At that moment, Su Zimo was already completely immersed in a Yang spirit section. When he truly learned the words of the dragon's world and studied the Baron Dermic art and the Essence spirit secret skill again, he finally understood the profoundness of that Dermic art and secret skill. It was only then that he truly felt the terror of the Yang spirit section. Initially, when Su Zimo released the Baron Dermic art, it covered a huge area like a swamp with him as the center. All living beings in the swamp, be it friend or foe, would be corroded by the Baron Dermic art. But now, a gray mist appeared in Su Zimo's palm. It rolled and changed, emitting a strange aura. The mist seemed to contain the mysteries of heaven and earth and the truths of the great Tao. This was Baron, something that could change according to one's will. Previously, even at the center of Baron, the reduction in lifespan was only 100 years per breath. If one was at the edge of Baron, the reduction in lifespan would be even slower and almost negligible. But now, any living being that came into contact with the mist in Su Zimo's palm would have their lifespan reduced by 500 years per breath. After comprehending the profoundness of Baron, its power was 5 times greater than before. This was a qualitative leap. A void reversion had a lifespan of 5,000 years. 500 years per breath meant that even void reversions with 5,000 years of lifespan could not last more than 10 breaths under the envelopment of Baron. Su Zimo waved his palm, and the mist dissipated. After comprehending the words of the dragons, the power of Baron increased greatly, but that was secondary. The true gain was the essence of the Yang spirit section, the Essence spirit secret skill. Chapter 1085. Half a year later. Dragon Bone Valley, Illumination Dragon's habitat. In a dark and warm cave, 2 beams of light suddenly lit up like 2 balls of flames. Under the illumination of the 2 balls of flames, the outline of a figure gradually became clearer. It was Su Zimo, who had been in seclusion for half a year. He heaved a long sigh of relief, and the flames in his eyes retracted gradually, turning into nothingness. The entire cave abode returned to darkness. He had gained a lot in the past half a year. It was not only his comprehension of the Baron Dermic art and Essence spirit secret skill, even his Illumination Dragon eye had mutated. Initially, there was an Illumination stone in his right eye. However, after half a year of cultivation, the Illumination stone had already disappeared. To be precise, it had fused into his right eye. Be it the Illumination Sword Formation or the Illumination Dragon Eye, they were both secret skills comprehended through the Illumination Stone. But now, those 2 secret skills had merged into one in Su Zimo's body. That visual technique could no longer be considered as the Illumination Dragon Eye. The power released by the visual technique was not only the scorching heat of the Illumination Dragon Eye, but also the sharpness of the Illumination Sword Formation. That visual technique had become the true illumination eye. Su Zimo stood up slowly. He could sense the changes in his body for the past half a year. Without the restriction of the black-haired essence spirit, he was no different from dragons. He cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness day and night, and the strength in his body rose daily. That was the strength of dragons. As long as he continued to grow, the strength in his body would continue to rise. Coupled with the augmentation of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, Su Zimo's cultivation speed was even faster, and he almost had no bottlenecks at the Void Reversion Realm. Su Zimo wanted to cultivate to the peak of the Void Reversion Realm as soon as possible. At the peak of the Void Reversion Realm, he could undergo the baptism of the ancestral dragon divine pillar and enter the Dharma characteristic realm in one go to comprehend the innate divine powers of dragons. He would only truly have the strength to protect himself after entering the Dharma characteristic realm and relying on his true body of dragons. Of course, Su Zimo had another layer of anticipation in his heart. In his memories, the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness ended at the Yang section, and there were no more words left. But he had a feeling that this matter was not so simple. The mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the 12 demon kings of the 12 demon kings of the 12 demon kings. But now, there were only 8 demon kings in his bloodline phenomenon, including the divine dragon. If that was the case, there should still be 4 demon kings that had yet to appear. He wanted to enter the Dharma characteristic realm as soon as possible and see if there was anything left behind from the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. Su Zimo stood up. After half a year of seclusion, he planned to see how Solitary Cloud was doing. As soon as he left his cave, he saw many dragons loitering outside. Apart from the Torch Dragon, there were also some Azure Dragons, hornless dragons, and winged dragons. He's out. Quickly inform Brother Yang. You stay here and watch, I'll go now. When some of the dragons saw Su Zimo leave the cave, they exclaimed in a low voice. Some of them turned around and left, quickly disappearing from sight. Su Zimo did not mind and walked towards the habitat of the mixed-blood dragons. Before long, he saw Solitary Cloud. Solitary Cloud had changed even more after half a year. Actually, after Solitary Cloud's heart was shattered by Dean, he reconstructed a new heart in the primordial divine spring. In fact, that heart was no different from a dragon's heart. Half a year ago, he was bullied by many mixed-blood dragons and did not have the time to cultivate. As such, the dragon heart did not display its might. But now, after half a year of cultivation, his aura had changed drastically and was infinitely close to that of a dragon. At the very least, Solitary Cloud no longer felt any pressure in front of a WIRM, Rain Dragon, and other mixed-blood dragons. Dragon blood had already begun to flow through his body. He was only short of an opportunity to transform into a dragon. Su Zimo was rather happy to see such a change in Solitary Cloud. The two of them chatted for a while before Su Zimo stood up and bade farewell. Before long, a group of dragons walked over. The leader of the dragons had a head of black hair and was extremely beautiful. She was even prettier than Long Shi, whom Su Zimo had seen before. However, the dragons had a feminine gaze as they glared at Su Zimo coldly with an unfriendly expression. Trouble is here. Su Zimo sighed internally. He did not know what relationship this female dragon had with Long Shi, and if she was her elder sister or younger sister. Your Long Mos? The leader of the blue dragons blocked Su Zimo's path and asked coldly. Su Zimo nodded. Compared to Long Shi, this female dragon looked much more normal, and her voice was pleasant, unlike Long Shi's loud voice. I'm Long Yang, the Azure Dragon in green robes said indifferently and paused, as though he was waiting for Su Zimo to reveal a look of fear and respect. Long Yang, number 1 of the hidden dragon ranking. Among the dragons, no one would be indifferent when they heard that name. Half a year ago, Su Zimo had inadvertently glanced at the hidden dragon ranking. However, for the past half a year, he had been focused on studying the words of dragons and had long forgotten about the hidden dragon ranking. When he heard the name Long Yang, he was only stunned for a moment and was a little lost. Pondering for a moment, Su Zimo cupped his fists. "Greetings, Miss Long Yang." The moment he said that, the entire place fell silent. The surrounding dragons grinned and gasped, looking at Su Zimo as though they were looking at a dead man. Although Long Yang was beautiful, he was a man. Among the dragons, everyone knew that this was his taboo. In the past, there was a dragon who mocked him to his face and was forced into the dragon blood battlefield by him. At the risk of being severely injured, he killed that dragon. Ever since then, no one among the dragons dared to touch his taboo. But now, Su Zimo's unintentional words were equivalent to touching Long Yang's reverse scale. Long Yang's expression turned cold instantly. When Su Zimo saw the reactions of the surrounding dragons, he realized that he might have said something wrong. However, he truly could not figure out the reason. After all, the person before him was a woman and Su Zimo did not want to be entangled with her. He cupped his fists once more and said sincerely, "Miss Long Yang, it's my first time here and I might have offended you in any way. Please forgive me." Although he was sincere, his words were extremely ear-piercing to Long Yang. "Cut the crap and enter the dragon blood battlefield." Long Yang grit his teeth. "Today, I'll take your life." Su Zimo frowned. Even now, he was still confused. This was his first time meeting Long Yang. How did they end up in the dragon blood battlefield? According to Uncle Yen, entering the dragon blood battlefield meant that one could fight to the death. Even if one died, no one would interfere. Long Yang glared at Su Zimo coldly and turned to leave, heading straight for the dragon blood battlefield. Unless one stayed in their own dragon's lair, they had no right to reject a challenge and had to accept it. Su Zimo pondered for a moment and could not figure it out. However, he still followed with an indifferent expression. It was just a life and death battle. He had experienced too much. The dragons looked excited as they headed towards the dragon blood battlefield in a black mass. Passing by the central square, Su Zimo looked up and finally saw Long Yang's name on the first row of the hidden dragon ranking. Number 1 of the hidden dragon ranking, Su Zimo smiled gently and murmured, "That's good as well. Once and for all, there shouldn't be any trouble after this battle." Chapter 1086. Sister Shi. Among the dragons, a hornless dragon ran in front of Long Shi and panted slightly. Long Yang is looking for Long Mo. The two of them are going to fight to the death in the dragon blood battlefield.
Ah.
Long Shi's expression changed slightly as she frowned and fell into deep thought. "Sister Shi, this is a good thing, right? After all, Long Mo bullied you before," the hornless dragon said tentatively. "What do you know?" Long Shi stomped her feet and turned to run over. The news of Long Yang and Long Mo entering the dragon blood battlefield spread rapidly through the entire Dragonbone Valley. Almost all the dragons who were not in seclusion ran over to watch the battle. Who do you think will win this battle? Of course, Long Yang is the number 1 of the hidden dragon ranking and Long Mo is the 5th. Furthermore, I heard that he has just entered the Void Reversion realm. That's right. Instead of saying who wins or loses, let's talk about how long Long Mo can last. I heard that Long Mo had a death wish and violated Long Yang's taboo. Before Long Yang and Long Mo arrived, many dragons had already gathered around the battlefield, and it was bustling. Before long, the dragons dispersed. Long Yang walked over slowly with a dark expression and ascended the blood-stained dragon blood battlefield. Su Zimo followed behind with an indifferent expression. The battlefield was vast and filled with the strong stench of blood. The two of them stood opposite each other. "Long Yang, get down here. I don't need you to stand up for me." Suddenly, a loud roar sounded from below the battlefield. It was Long Shi who appeared and shouted at Long Yang. Long Yang glanced sideways and shook his head. "Sister Long Shi, this has nothing to do with you. Long Mo has a death wish." "Long Yang, you." Long Shi was speechless. Under normal circumstances, she should be happy that Long Yang helped her teach Long Mo a lesson. Even if Long Mo was killed, it had nothing to do with her. However, for some reason, deep in her heart, she did not want the two of them to fight to the death. More and more dragons gathered here. Long Yang said faintly, "If you have any last words, you can tell me. I will complete them for you." Su Zimo couldn't help but laugh. He shook his head and said, "I don't have any last words. Just don't disappoint me. I haven't exercised my muscles and bones since I came here." How arrogant. To the dragons, that sentence sounded extremely arrogant. A series of boos sounded from the dragons. Many dragons sneered. However, Long Yang did not smile. He suddenly realized that Long Mo was too calm. Long Yang put away his contempt and narrowed his eyes. Suddenly, he exerted strength in his feet and turned into a green beam of light. Instantly, he arrived in front of Su Zimo. Clang, clang, clang. Long Yang reached out his palm and bent his fingers slightly. Sharp nails popped out from his fingertips, shining with a cold light. A strong suction force was emitted from the palm, which completely encapsulated Su Zimo's figure. Su Zimo looked surprised. Long Yang's move was an extremely brilliant melee combat technique. When the Dragon Clan fought, most of them relied on their physical bodies to fight in close combat. But now, not only did Long Yang reveal his powerful physique and terrifying burst forth, he even revealed this brilliant melee combat technique and instantly gained the upper hand. Su Zimo was in no hurry. Rubbing his palm like a saber, he slashed towards the void not far ahead. Haha, what's that? Long Mo is already flustered. When the dragons below caught sight of Su Zimo's move, they burst into laughter. However, right after, the laughter of the dragons stopped abruptly. As Su Zimo's palm slashed down, a gigantic ocean vortex appeared on the battlefield. A series of terrifying roars sounded, as though it could engulf all living beings and drown them completely. Vortex dance. He used his palm as a saber and released the saber intent of the sea calming manual. Long Yang's expression changed slightly. The suction force that burst forth from his palm dissipated instantly against the terrifying vortex. His body swayed, and he could not stand steadily.
Splash.
Long Yang roared and released his blood chi, causing the sound of a tsunami to echo from his body. Tsunami blood. A tsunami seemed to have condensed within Long Yang's body as well, fighting against the surrounding vortex. Instantly, his body stabilized.
Swoosh.
Long Yang's palm continued to grab Su Zimo's face. Su Zimo lamented internally. Ever since he started his cultivation, there were only 2 cultivators in the entire cultivation world who were able to cultivate the blood tide technique. Who would have thought that in less than a year after coming to the Dragon Clan, the 2 Dragon Clan members he encountered would have reached this level? Without thinking, Su Zimo released his blood chi right away as well. Rumble.
Boom.
The sound of a tsunami echoed. Su Zimo strode forward and punched Long Yang's palm viciously.
Bang.
2 tremendous forces suddenly collided and blood chi corroded. It was as though 2 gigantic tsunamis had collided with a loud bang. Long Yang's expression changed slightly as he retreated. Su Zimo took a step back as well. After coming to Dragon Bone Valley, this was the first dragon that could force him to take a step back. All right. Su Zimo laughed and strode forward once more, charging towards Long Yang. Long Yang frowned. This collision caused his aura to stagnate, and he could not advance again. However, Long Mo did not seem to be affected at all. In reality, when Su Zimo cultivated the tidal manual, his blood chi surged endlessly like a tsunami, wave after wave, without stopping. With the help of tidal might, his strength was still rising continuously. Su Zimo threw out another punch with unparalleled ferocity. Long Yang did not dodge or dodge. His blood chi burst forth, and he punched in reverse.
Boom.
The fists collided. Su Zimo took another step back. As for Long Yang, he took 3 steps back. Before he could catch his breath, a figure flashed in front of him. Su Zimo had charged forward once more and punched down.
Boom.
Following that, Long Yang retreated once more.
Boom. Boom. Boom.
Su Zimo advanced continuously and punched down one after another. His strength rose continuously, and he was like a peerless god of war with a torrential aura. His attacks were as dense as rain, but they were extremely ferocious and did not give Long Yang any chance to catch his breath. Long Yang could only retreat repeatedly against the head-on collision. His expression became somewhat unsightly. Against such an attack, he did not even have the strength to retaliate. It was impossible for him to even retreat, let alone retaliate. Right now, he was completely trapped in Su Zimo's attacks. He could not advance. He could not retreat. He could only defend continuously until his strength was exhausted. It was a vicious cycle. Or rather, he could not last until then. After this series of head-on collisions, a faint smell of blood had already appeared in Long Yang's mouth. His teeth were already loose from the impact. The surroundings of the battlefield were completely silent. The dragons were dumbfounded. What happened before them had completely exceeded their expectations. The number 1 of the hidden dragon ranking, Long Yang of the blue dragon lineage, was suppressed by an outsider with an impure bloodline. Chapter 1087. Long Shi opened her mouth slightly with disbelief in her eyes. She had experienced Su Zimo's strength before. However, she had not expected that Su Zimo would be able to fight against Long Yang. As a blue dragon, Long Yang had a powerful bloodline and was number 1 on the hidden dragon ranking. His combat strength was more than double hers. How could this outsider with an impure bloodline suppress Long Yang? Could it be that this outsider's bloodline was even stronger and nobler than the blue dragon's bloodline? That was impossible. Long Shi rejected that thought swiftly. The primordial 9 races reigned supreme throughout history. Even the other 9 races did not dare to surpass dragons in terms of bloodline. However, how did this person do it? He had only just entered the Void Reversion Realm. If he could cultivate to greater mastery and peak of the Void Reversion Realm, what would it be like? Long Shi was way too familiar with the dragons in the Dragonbone Valley, and there was nothing new about them. However, she knew nothing about Su Zimo. Suddenly, she felt a strong curiosity towards Su Zimo. Seems like he has to transform into a dragon. Yes, if this continues, Long Yang will probably be suppressed to death by Long Mo. Transforming into a half-dragon is enough to reverse the situation. The dragons discussed softly. Although Su Zimo had the upper hand on the battlefield, this was nothing in a fight between dragons. The outcome was far from being decided, let alone life and death. Roar. Under Su Zimo's suffocating pressure, Long Yang finally could not withstand it and let out a dragon roar. A series of crackling sounds came from his body and his body expanded, tearing his clothes apart. Green scales appeared on Long Yang's body one after another, shimmering with a cold glint. His body rose to a height of 10 feet. His entire body was wrapped in green scales that were airtight without any flaws. His thighs were strong and sharp claws grew from his feet that dug deep into the stone platform. Dragon claws as such could release even more terrifying power. Long Yang's movement technique's speed increased tremendously.
Bang.
Long Yang transformed into his half-dragon form and finally blocked Su Zimo's punch without retreating at all. Long Mo, this battle has just begun. Long Yang sneered. He exerted strength in his legs and his tall figure turned into a green light as he charged fiercely towards Su Zimo. Good timing. Su Zimo's eyes lit up. He did not take half a step back. With a boom, he strode out with the plow heaven stride and leaned close to Long Yang, who was approaching him.
Boom.
The two figures collided heavily with each other, causing a loud explosion. The entire space began to tremble. Both of them fell out. They were evenly matched. Hiss. This time, the dragon's expressions changed slightly. After Long Yang transformed into a half-dragon, his strength, speed, stamina, explosive power, and even defense had an extremely obvious increase. Even so, Long Yang did not have the upper hand. At this moment, Su Zimo's vitality had also been pushed to the limit. Apart from the fact that he did not use his bloodline phenomenon, his strength was completely released as well. His bloodline surged in his body like a tidal wave with a terrifying might. Su Zimo stood on the spot, and his scarlet hair danced like burning flames. His gaze was bright as he roared in laughter. Awesome again.
Boom.
In a flash, Su Zimo vanished from the spot. By the time he reappeared, he was already in front of Long Yang.
Bang.
Their fists collided, and the two of them clashed once more. This time round, neither of them retreated. The two of them were inches apart and glared at each other. With their powerful physiques, they withstood the power that surged into their bodies. There was a brief pause. All of a sudden, the two of them attacked at the same time, fighting speed with fist shadows.
Bang. Bang. Bang.
In the short span of 10 breaths, the two of them had exchanged at least 100 blows. Forces collided and flesh splattered in a terrifying manner. Melee combat was the most dangerous. Those 10 breaths were a perfect example of that. At this distance, no one could guarantee that they would be safe and sound. Both of them were already injured. The only thing they could do was to avoid their vitals as much as possible. Although the exchange between the two of them seemed short, in reality, it was a competition of burst power, strength, speed, and even stamina. In Long Yang's opinion, he would definitely be able to last until the end in his half-dragon form with his endless stamina and strong defense. However, after 10 breaths, Su Zimo's eyes shone brightly, and he fought even more valiantly. Long Yang could clearly see that although the wounds left by his dragon claws on Su Zimo's body had not healed, they had stopped bleeding. What terrifying regeneration capabilities! Long Yang vaguely realized that if this continued, it would be unknown who would win.
Boom.
After another clash, Long Yang retreated and widened the distance, panting slightly. The two figures stood still once more. A commotion broke out among the dragons, and an uproar broke out. Both of them were already injured. Su Zimo's scarlet robes were almost tore apart, and there were wounds on his body. However, they were not fatal, and were not deep. As for Long Yang, he looked extremely wretched as well. Dozens of dragon scales on his body had been knocked off, and the wounds on his body were all badly mangled. Long Yang took a deep breath and said sternly, "You're very strong and have far exceeded my expectations. I've decided not to hold back anymore and give you sufficient respect. I'll use my strongest methods to kill you here." Su Zimo had a smile on his face, completely fearless. He had fought to his heart's content in this battle. Back in the Dao inheritance ground, he could not use this body and bloodline. After that, his body was crippled by the D clan's half-martial ancestor. Ever since the Dao inheritance ground until now, Su Zimo had been suppressing a wave of anger in his heart. Now that he could finally vent it out, he felt extremely comfortable and carefree. No matter how Long Yang threatened, Su Zimo did not take it to heart. Although he was slightly injured as well, the situation was still under his control. "Come on, let me see what else you have." Su Zimo smiled gently, and his blood chi burst forth. He charged forward once more, leaving a series of afterimages behind him as he arrived before Long Yang instantly with an apocalyptic aura.
Boom.
Su Zimo threw out a punch. This was a punch that was released after channeling his blood chi to its limits and accumulating strength to its peak. It was as though it could crush all obstacles in front of him. This was also the most terrifying punch Su Zimo had released since the start of the battle. At the same time, a dazzling and resplendent brilliance suddenly flashed out from his right eye, and it contained an extremely fierce sharpness, like a scorching sun. Visual technique.
Boom.
A bedazzling beam of light burst forth, as though it could penetrate, burn and tear through everything. This was the illumination eye that was even more terrifying than the illumination dragon eye. The two extreme powers suddenly burst forth in perfect coordination without any flaws. Long Yang could even smell the aura of death, and his expression changed in shock. Chapter 1088. Long Yang did not have time to think. His blood chi surged, and his bones mutated. His initially 10 feet tall body expanded rapidly and elongated. A slender body soared into the skies and spiraled upwards. It was the complete form of dragons. The dragon body that was dozens of feet long was covered in green scales. There were 4 claws beneath its abdomen and horns on its head. The menacing dragon had swayed and soared into the clouds. It was almost a perfect dragon body. The moment Long Yang transformed into his dragon form, the beam of the illumination eye descended and landed on the dragon body.
Bang.
The dragon body soared into the skies, and the beam of light left a gigantic wound on the dragon body with blood gushing out. More than 10 dragon scales fell and were charred with sword marks all over them. The dragons were in an uproar when they saw that. Although the threat of visual techniques was great, their advantage was that they were instantaneous and caught the opponent off guard. The power of visual techniques was far inferior to many dermic arts. Even a powerful visual technique like the Illumination Dragon Eye could not penetrate the defense of the blue dragon's scales and injure its body. But now, Su Zimo's visual technique almost penetrated Long Yang's dragon body. One could imagine that if Long Yang had not transformed into his complete dragon body in time, he would have been half dead by now.
Bang.
The blue dragon swung its tail and collided with Su Zimo's fist. Su Zimo's body shuddered as he flew backwards. The strength of Long Yang, who had transformed into a blue dragon, was way too terrifying. He could not withstand it purely by relying on his true body and bloodline of dragons. The two of them seemed to be evenly matched in their exchange. However, in reality, Long Yang was the one who suffered a huge loss. He did not say anything, but his eyes were filled with intense pain. The wound on his dragon body that was caused by the illumination eye had a huge impact on him. Up till now, there were no signs of it healing. The blue dragon lineage was the most terrifying when it came to regeneration. The burning power of the Illumination Dragon Eye alone could not stop his body from healing. However, there was a sharpness mixed in with that wound that was tearing at his flesh continuously. It was on par with his regeneration capabilities. Long Yang shuttled through the clouds, but his body was constantly dripping with dragon blood. Every time he moved, his wounds would hurt. After transforming into the azure dragon form, the sky was filled with a heart-palpitating pressure. This was the pressure unique to dragons. Any race with inferior bloodlines would be affected by this pressure. The more inferior one's bloodline was, the greater the influence one would receive. Su Zimo looked up, his eyes shining brightly, but it was as if he couldn't feel it at all. Rumble. Within the clouds, a ferocious and terrifying dragon had suddenly stretched out. It opened its mouth and spat out a huge torrent towards Su Zimo. The torrent poured down and landed on the battlefield, forming a bottomless ocean. As a WIRM, Solitary Cloud knew similar dermic arts. However, the ferocious flood dragons could only roam freely in lakes and ponds. The dragons, on the other hand, were the ones who could overturn rivers and seas. In the face of such power, Su Zimo was as insignificant as an ant. Almost instantly, he was swallowed up by this tsunami. This dermic art was no different from a real ocean. In the face of the power of heaven and earth, any power was weak. Long Yang circled in midair and released his massive spirit consciousness. He stared at the surface of the sea with bright eyes, as though he was searching for something. A moment later, there was no movement on the surface of the sea, and Long Yang heaved a sigh of relief. Roar. Long Yang let out a long roar excitedly. Is it over? The dragons looked at the battlefield, and the same thought flashed through their minds. To be fair, none of the dragons at the Void Reversion Realm in the entire Dragonbone Valley could defend against Long Yang's dermic art. However, Long Mo was different. Even though they saw Long Mo being devoured, the dragons still felt uneasy. Long Mo did not seem like he would die so easily. All of a sudden, the initially calm surface of the sea began to spin continuously, as though it was being fiddled with by a pair of invisible hands. It was getting faster and faster. A moment later, a gigantic vortex formed in the middle of the ocean. In the center of the vortex, A tall purgatory shrouded in blood chi floated up slowly, with ghostly wails and howls coming from within. Break. Su Zimo's voice sounded in the purgatory. The purgatory shattered. A tall mountain of corpses appeared and dyed the entire ocean blood red. Su Zimo stood on the mountain of corpses like a grim reaper from hell that could not be looked at. The two saber intents of the Shura saber and sea calming manual fused together, and Su Zimo broke free.
Swoosh.
Long Yang was enraged and panted heavily as he looked down at Su Zimo. All of a sudden, Long Yang swooped down and opened his mouth. An extremely terrifying roar burst forth from the depths of his throat that shook the world. It was the roar of a blue dragon. Dragons of the 5 lineages were born with a sound domain technique like dragon roars. Most cultivators would not be able to withstand the roars of mixed dragons such as flood dragons and rain dragons, let alone the 5 lineages. The power of the roar of dragons of the 5 lineages was even more terrifying. Even pure-blooded ferocious beasts that were slightly weaker could be shaken to death. Among the 5 lineages, the roar of the blue dragon was the strongest. That was because the strength of a dragon roar was closely related to one's bloodline. The strongest bloodline of the blue dragon meant that the power of the dragon roar was the greatest. Su Zimo's expression changed starkly. The moment the dragon roar sounded, he felt a piercing pain in his ears. How strong was his body? Most sound domain secret skills did not affect him when he cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. However, before the roar of the blue dragon was released completely, he already felt pain in his ears. Immediately, Su Zimo realized that he could not defend against the roar of the blue dragon if he maintained this state. If he took it head-on, his eardrums would be pierced. Even his essence spirit might be shaken.
Crackle.
Suddenly, a series of abnormal movements came from Su Zimo's body.
Shing.
The clothes on his body were torn apart, and his body expanded rapidly. Scarlet red scales grew on his body, like red-hot iron plates, emitting a scorching aura. Dragonification. Half-dragon form. In the eyes of the dragons, it was not right that Long Yang could not suppress Su Zimo right away, even after transforming into his complete dragon form. However, the dragons did not know that up till this point of his cultivation, the only living being that could force Su Zimo to this extent was the Protoss commander of the past. Even against Di'in, Su Zimo did not have to transform into a dragon. After transforming into his half-dragon form, Su Zimo's strength, speed, and defense increased exponentially as well. The piercing pain in his ears was greatly reduced. However, that was not enough. The roar of the blue dragon had already erupted completely. Su Zimo's eyes lit up and his blood chi surged. The phantom of a divine dragon appeared behind him, spiraling upwards in a lifelike manner. The man and dragon glared at Long Yang, who was charging over, exuding a shuddering aura with a wanton might. For some reason, Long Yang felt a hint of fear when he was stared at by the man and dragon and instinctively paused. Chapter 1089. What is that? A bloodline phenomenon? Long Mo has actually cultivated a bloodline phenomenon. The dragons were in an uproar. In the Dragonbone Valley, there were at least 20 dragons who had cultivated to the tide-like blood. However, there was only one who could cultivate a bloodline phenomenon. It was the only 5-clawed divine dragon of the blue dragon lineage, the current number 1 of the heavenly dragon ranking, the young master of the blue dragon lineage, Long Song. But now, they saw a bloodline phenomenon on another dragon. One could imagine how shocked the dragons were. Although Long Mo has cultivated a bloodline phenomenon, his phenomenon doesn't seem to be as strong as Long Song's phenomenon. The difference is way too great. They can't be compared at all. Long Song's bloodline phenomenon is enough to suppress a divine dragon like Long Mo with ease. The dragon's guesses were both right and wrong. That divine dragon phantom was indeed Su Zimo's bloodline phenomenon. However, it was only one of his 8 demon kings. Su Zimo did not reveal all of his phenomenons. Firstly, Long Yang had not forced him to that extent yet. Secondly, it was way too shocking for 8 demon kings to appear at the same time. Not to mention, a blood-colored butterfly would appear after the 8 demon kings. A dragon said in a deep voice, "Even so, even the weakest bloodline phenomenon is powerful and cannot be underestimated." Long Mo has already transformed into a half-dragon. If he were to transform into a complete dragon, Long Yang would be doomed. Impossible. Another dragon shook his head. Long Mo's bloodline is impure. Transforming into a half-dragon is already his limit. The dragon was right. Right now, Su Zimo could only transform into a half-dragon at most, and could not transform into a complete dragon for some reason. However, even in his half-dragon form, it was enough for him to sweep through everything. The power of the blue dragon's roar had already erupted completely. Standing on the spot, Su Zimo's gaze was burning as he suddenly opened his mouth. The divine dragon behind him opened its mouth at the same time. The man and dragon's movements were synchronized, and there was no difference. Suddenly, a deafening roar burst forth. The world trembled, and the clouds changed.
Roar.
It was met head-on with a dragon roar. The power of the 2 dragon roars collided in midair. The entire world seemed to have quietened down. Instantly, there was silence. Great sound void. However, every single dragon's heart shuddered.
Ugh.
Long Yang's body trembled, and he suddenly grunted. His face turned pale. The dragons were moved. As everyone knew, the cry of the blue dragon was the strongest among the cries of the 5 lineages. The 2 dragon roars collided, but Long Yang was at a disadvantage. What did that mean? Could it be that Long Mo's bloodline was stronger than the blue dragon bloodline? Disbelief appeared on the faces of the dragons. All of a sudden, Su Zimo rose from the ground and took advantage of the moment when Long Yang's body shuddered to leap up. He parted the clouds and rode on Long Yang's neck. Long Yang was enraged. To the dragon race, being ridden on the neck was a great humiliation. No one could surpass him. The dignity of dragons was not to be trampled on. Su Zimo did not care. His legs were powerful as he gripped Long Yang's neck tightly. Raising his fist, he smashed down viciously on Long Yang's head.
Bang.
There was a deafening sound. Long Yang cried out tragically. Su Zimo's punch was enough to shatter divine weapons. However, it could not break open Long Yang's head. It was clear how strong the blue dragon's body was. However, when the punch landed, Long Yang's head was also badly mutilated.
Roar.
Long Yang roared angrily, and his eyes were bloodshot. His entire body rolled continuously and released a series of spinning and twisting powers. Even though Su Zimo's legs were gripping Long Yang's neck tightly, he was almost thrown into the air. Su Zimo hurriedly reached out with both hands and gripped Long Yang's pair of dragon horns tightly to stabilize himself. However, Long Yang's body did not show any signs of stopping as he rolled, shuttled, circled, and spun in midair. As for Su Zimo, he could only stabilize himself with both hands and legs. However, he could not free his hands to continue attacking. Both sides fell into a strange stalemate. Of course, if nothing unexpected happened, such a stalemate would consume a lot of Long Yang's stamina. If this continued, his defeat was inevitable. Long Mo made a huge mistake. That's right. The horn of the blue dragon contains many offensive dermic formulations and the essence of one's strength. Long Mo is courting death by holding onto the horn of the blue dragon. The dragons watched coldly from the sidelines and naturally saw everything more clearly. Just as they were discussing, Long Yang's dragon horns suddenly turned red like burning iron rods, and their temperature rose continuously. Su Zimo's gaze focused. This should have been a dermic formulation of the Illumination Dragon lineage, but Long Yang could control it freely. Under normal circumstances, if anyone else continued to hold onto the blue dragon horns, their palms would be burned to ashes. If they let go, they would naturally be thrown down. However, Su Zimo was the one riding on Long Yang's neck. In his eyes, Long Yang's counterattack was not a threat at all. Firstly, his right hand was the divine phoenix bone. Even if his flesh was burned to ashes, the bones in his right hand would not be damaged. Secondly, Su Zimo would not hold onto the dragon horns foolishly. He had a trump card as well. All right, I'll let you experience the might of Baron. Su Zimo sneered coldly, and his eyes lit up as he secretly conjured hand seals. Suddenly, 2 balls of gray mist appeared in his palms. The 2 balls of gray mist enveloped the scarlet dragon horns and isolated them from the high temperature. Su Zimo was still gripping the blue dragon horns tightly, and his palms were unharmed. Long Mo actually has a way to deal with it as well. As the saying goes, virtue rises 1 foot, the devil rises 10 feet. I'm afraid it's hard to say who will win. What's that gray mist dermic art? Why does it seem like it's not very powerful? Many dragons frowned slightly, with confusion in their eyes. On the surface, the power of Baron only isolated the heat of the blue dragon horns. However, in reality, Baron was already used on Long Yang. Long Yang's lifespan was decreasing at a rate of 500 years per breath. In the blink of an eye, 10 breaths passed and Long Yang's lifespan was reduced by more than 5,000 years. Normally speaking, the lifespan of a void reversion was only 5,000 years. However, dragons were one of the primordial 9 races and once dominated the primordial era. Their bloodline was strong and was different from humans. Although dragons had an extremely low reproduction rate, they had long lifespans. Even without cultivating, they had lifespans of tens of thousands or even 100,000 years. As for human cultivators, they could only live for 100,000 years after entering the Mahayana realm. That was the difference. That was the reason why Long Yang, who possessed a long lifespan, did not sense anything unusual after Baron descended. The first to realize that something was amiss was not Long Yang, but the many dragons' elders who were hiding in the dark. On the surface, this battle seemed like a life and death battle between 2 dragons. However, it had already alarmed the elders of the 5 lineages of dragons. Chapter 1090. In a corner not far away from the Dragon Blood battlefield, 5 blurry figures stood, as though they were in another dimension, watching the battle silently. Even if dragons passed by, they would not be able to see them. The 5 figures were elders from the 5 lineages of dragons. Elder 4 of the Illumination Dragon lineage was here to watch the battle. Does the Illumination Dragon lineage really intend to let this lad be the young master? The dragon's elder frowned slightly, and his tone was clearly doubtful. Eldering dragons shook his head as well. This lad's combat strength is not weak. However, his bloodline is impure, and his potential is limited. He's not worth nurturing. The other dragons were still rather critical of Elder Illumination Dragon for sending Su Zimo and Solitary Cloud into the primordial divine spring to recuperate. Torch Dragon 4th Elder merely smiled and said, "Let's continue watching." As time passed by, the elders gradually revealed looks of surprise. To think that this lad's combat strength would reach such a level. This is somewhat beyond my expectations. His bloodline is impure, and he can't transform into a complete dragon. That's not a big problem. Once he cultivates to the perfected void reversion realm and receives the baptism of the ancestral dragon divine pillar, he should be able to transform. The elders of the 5 dragons commented as they chatted. As the battle progressed, the elders' attitude towards Su Zimo gradually changed as well. 2 breaths after Baron descended, the dragon's elder smiled gently. Interesting, this lad possesses the power to weaken lifespans. 500 years in a single breath. It's fine against low-level races, but it's useless against us dragons. The elder of the Black Dragon people had a relaxed expression and was not too bothered. After 7 breaths, Elder 4 of Illumination Dragon said in a low voice with a grim expression, "Something's wrong." The other 4 elders exchanged glances and noticed something amiss at the same time. The dragon's elder narrowed his eyes and said sternly, "The power of this dermic art to reduce one's lifespan is irreversible." Although dermic arts that targeted lifespan were extremely rare and precious, it was not as if they did not exist. However, the power of these dermic arts could be recovered. Simply put, the release of a dermic art would reduce one's lifespan by 500 years. After the dermic art ended, the lifespan would be recovered. But desolation was different. Losing 500 years of lifespan was equivalent to losing 500 years of lifespan. It was irreversible and irreversible. This was too terrifying. No one would complain about having a long life. Just think about it. A high-spirited and graceful young man suddenly had his lifespan reduced by 70 years and became an old man with one foot in the grave. What sort of terrifying situation was this? Even dragons with long lifespans would not be able to remain indifferent when their lifespans were reduced by thousands of years. As elders, they shouldn't interfere in this kind of life and death battle between the younger generation of dragons. However, Long Yang was ranked first on the hidden dragon roll. On the other hand, Su Zimo was an outsider who had joined the dragons for less than half a year. His bloodline was not pure, so it was inevitable that his feelings would be biased. The Black Dragon People's elder furrowed his brows and walked out of the void. The other four hurriedly followed. Old tree. It's not good to interfere in the fight between the younger generation, right? Dragons have never broken this rule, Torch Dragon Fourth Elder said with a frown. The Black Dragon People's elder had a hesitant expression as well. Right then, the expressions of the 5 dragons' elders changed at the same time. Initially, they were in the void and could not sense it. It was only when they were outside that they could clearly sense the terror of Baron. The power of this dermic art ignores one's cultivation realm? The Dragon's elder widened his eyes in disbelief. I think so. The Dragon's elder's expression changed gradually as he nodded. This meant that when this dermic art descended on them, their lifespans would be reduced by 500 years per breath as well. Of course, given their combat strength, they could kill Su Zimo in less than a breath. Even so, this spell was enough to shock the world. Eldering Dragons said meaningfully, "This long MO has truly given us too many surprises." At that moment, 10 breaths had passed since Su Zimo released the Baron dermic art. A look of determination flashed through the eyes of the Black Dragon People's elder, and he was prepared to attack. If this continued, even if Long Yang did not die, a paragon like the Black Dragon People would die after expending too much of his lifespan. At this moment, there was a sudden change on the battlefield. Su Zimo, who initially had the upper hand, leaped down from Long Yang's body and dispersed the gray fog with both hands. He stood at the other end of the battlefield with an indifferent expression. He had stopped. Su Zimo, who initially had the upper hand, did not kill them all. Instead, he stopped at the right time. Although losing 5,000 years of lifespan was a considerable loss for Long Yang, it was not fatal. This was a lesson and a warning. After Su Zimo stopped, the Black Dragon People's elder retracted his footsteps and heaved a sigh of relief. In the Dragon Blood battlefield, Su Zimo looked at Long Yang not far away with a calm gaze. The outcome of this battle was decided. Or rather, life and death were decided. If he continued to use Baron, Long Yang would have no other choice. There would only be one outcome. His lifespan would be exhausted and he would die. He was not a bloodthirsty person to begin with and did not have any deep feud with Long Yang. He did not intend to kill him. It was enough to reduce his lifespan by 5,000 years as a lesson. Long Yang hovered in midair motionlessly and glared at Su Zimo with a complicated expression. The initial anger in his eyes was no longer there. He could naturally sense Su Zimo's mercy. However, he would not admit defeat. Deep down, he was prouder than anyone else. Long Mo, don't think that you can make me admit defeat just because you stopped. Long Yang pursed his lips with a stubborn expression as he grit his teeth. I still have one more move. I haven't lost yet. The dragons were shocked. They could sense Long Yang's will to die. He was truly going to fight to the death. Long Yang, stop. Long she could not help but shout. Long Yang shook his head and looked at Su Zimo, saying slowly, Su Zimo, take this. Essence Spirit Secret Skill, Blue Dragon's Wrath. Before he could finish his sentence, green light burst forth from Long Yang's glabella, and a green divine dragon with towering horns tore out of his body. It opened its bloody mouth and charged towards Su Zimo with a menacing expression. The dragon's hearts tightened. A fight between essence spirits. Success or failure depended on this move. In the eyes of the dragons, Su Zimo had joined the Dragon Bone Valley for less than a year and had yet to cultivate the essence spirit secret skills of the dragons. Against this move, Su Zimo was most likely doomed. However, on the battlefield, Su Zimo had a calm expression as he looked at the incoming azure dragon. His glabella shone, and his massive spirit consciousness condensed continuously. A palm-sized scarlet scale floated out from his glabella. It looked extremely ordinary. Compared to Long Yang's Blue Dragon's Wrath, it was nothing special. It was only a dragon scale, the reverse scale of a dragon. Chapter 1091. It was the essence spirit secret skill of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the Great Wilderness, the Yang spirit section. It was also the essence of the Yang spirit section. The reverse scale was a scale in an extremely hidden area beneath the necks of dragons. It was crescent-shaped, and once touched, it would definitely incur the wrath of the dragons. Therefore, there was a saying that had been passed down since ancient times. Anyone who touched the reverse scale of a dragon would definitely die. That statement was the essence of the essence spirit secret skill. The scarlet reverse scale in midair did not have to enter Long Yang's consciousness to kill him. It could only kill him by making contact with his essence spirit. As long as Long Yang's Blue Dragon's Wrath collided with the reverse scale, his essence spirit would be destroyed even if it was dozens of feet away. That was the terror of the reverse scale. That reverse scale was not to be touched. Anyone who touched it would die. Throughout history, there had never been an essence spirit secret skill that possessed such domineering power. The moment the reverse scale descended, the dragons could not sense it. However, Long Yang felt his scalp tingle and a chill run down his spine, causing his hair to stand on end. He had a feeling in his heart. It was as though he would die the next moment. At the same time, the elders of the 5 lineage dragons who were watching from afar were shocked as well. Given their cultivation realms, they could naturally sense the terrifying aura emitted by the reverse scale. The green divine dragon in midair looked majestic and powerful with a torrential aura. However, it was far inferior compared to the reverse scale. The 2 essence spirit secret skills burst forth and collided instantly. Even the elders of the 5 lineage dragons could not make it in time. Long Yang is finished. That thought flashed through the minds of the elders of the 5 lineage dragons at the same time. The eyes of the elder of the Black Dragon people were filled with deep regret. He should have stepped forward when Long Mo just now showed mercy. If he had stepped forward in time, that terrifying killing move would not have descended and Long Yang would not have died. Long Mo could not be blamed for this. It was only right for Long Mo to kill Long Yang in a life and death battle. Furthermore, Long Mo had already stopped before this. Perhaps this is Long Yang's fate. The elder of the Black Dragon people let out a long sigh. A battle between essence spirits took a long time to describe, but it actually happened in an instant. In midair, the ferocious green dragon crashed directly into the reverse scale, and its entire body instantly stopped in midair. Then, under the watchful eyes of everyone, cracks appeared on the azure dragon's body. That reverse scale was undamaged. Not far away, Long Yang's expression suddenly froze on his face. His gaze was blank and unfocused as it gradually dimmed. Su Zimo frowned slightly. If he persevered, although his essence spirit would be shaken, Long Yang would definitely die. However, there was no need for him to do so. Su Zimo's heart stirred, and he dispersed the reverse scale. In midair, the green divine dragon did not last long before it turned into light spots and dissipated into the air. Long Yang closed his eyes and his huge body fell from the sky. With a loud bang, he crashed onto the battlefield, causing dust to fly everywhere. Su Zimo sighed softly. Long Yang was not dead. However, his essence spirit was already filled with cracks. Thankfully, Su Zimo stopped in time. If the reverse scale had existed for a moment longer, Long Yang's essence spirit might have been destroyed, and he might have died. The elders of the 5 lineage dragons heaved a sigh of relief when they sensed the changes that happened. The elder of the Black Dragon people was even more delighted. On the battlefield, the life aura in Long Yang's body was negligible and almost undetectable. The dragons did not know about Long Yang's situation and thought that he was dead. The dragons were in an uproar. Some were enraged, some were shocked, some were sad, and some were stunned on the spot. In the eyes of the dragons, Long Yang was already at perfected void reversion realm. Even if a battle between essence spirits was dangerous, there was no way he would die. But now, Long Yang was lying motionless on the ground without any signs of life. Long Yang was dead in battle. Many dragons rushed onto the battlefield. Some blue dragons had bloodshot eyes with sorrowful expressions. A blue dragon turned around and glared at Su Zimo, shouting, "Su Zimo, I want to challenge you. Let's fight to the death in this dragon blood battlefield." "Let me do it. Long Mo, I challenge you." Another black dragon people stood out. "What are you guys doing?" Long Can of the Candle Dragons hurriedly stood beside Su Zimo and shouted, "This is a life and death battle between the two of them. You can't blame Brother Mo.
So be it."
Do you think we Candle Dragons will be afraid of you guys?" Another Candle Dragon said loudly. "All of you, quiet down." Long she roared. However, her voice was quickly drowned out by the clamor of the battlefield. The crowd was ferocious. In the blink of an eye, a group battle was about to break out in the Dragon Blood battlefield. "What are you guys doing?" Right then, a dignified voice sounded in midair and entered the ears of every dragon. It was extremely intimidating. The dragons were shocked and looked towards the voice. 5 figures stood in midair, exuding powerful auras. Their auras were unbridled. Against the suppression of that might, the blood of the dragons that had just surged gradually calmed down. The elders of the 5 lineages of dragons had arrived. "What's the commotion? Do you guys have any manners?" The elder of the Black Dragon people surveyed his surroundings with a sharp gaze. None of the dragons dared to meet his gaze. "Elder, that outsider killed Brother Yang." Finally, a blue dragon could not help it and said sadly with reddened eyes, "The Dragon Blood battlefield is a life and death battle to begin with. If you're afraid of death, don't come here." The elder of the Black Dragon people said coldly. But the blue dragon was still indignant. He was of the same lineage as Long Yang to begin with, and was naturally extremely close to the latter in his heart. Su Zimo had been in the Dragon Bone Valley for less than a year and was of the Illumination Dragon lineage with an impure bloodline. In his eyes, Su Zimo was an outsider. "No buts," the elder of the Black Dragon people shook his head. "This is the rule of dragons. There's no room for doubt." Pausing for a moment, the elder of the Black Dragon people looked deeply at Su Zimo and said slowly, "Furthermore, Long Yang isn't dead yet." The moment he said that, the dragons were stunned. Long Yang was not dead? Under normal circumstances, even if one's essence spirit did not die immediately after suffering such injuries, it would be unsalvageable. However, there was a primordial divine spring in the Dragon Bone Valley that could revive the dead. The elder of the Black Dragon people waved his sleeves and released a stream of dermic powers. Long Yang's massive body transformed into human form. The elder of the Black Dragon people's gaze landed on Su Zimo again. Pausing for a moment, he nodded to the latter before leaving with Long Yang. Although the elder of the Black Dragon people did not say anything, that nod was already rare. The elder of the Black Dragon people expressed his gratitude to Su Zimo. Just now, the essence spirit fight happened in an instant, and the dragons did not know what happened. However, the elders of the 5 lineages could sense it. If Su Zimo had not held back, Long Yang would have died by now. This battle not only established Su Zimo's status among the dragons' juniors, he also obtained the recognition of many dragons' elders. Chapter 1092. As the elders of the Black Dragon people left with Long Yang, the dragons gradually dispersed as well. Before long she left, she turned to look at Su Zimo with a complicated gaze. Of course, there were still many dragons surrounding Su Zimo in the Dragon Blood battlefield, unwilling to leave. Most of them were Illumination dragons. This battle had boosted the morale of the Illumination dragon lineage. Long Yang's defeat meant that Su Zimo was the new number 1 of the Hidden Dragon ranking. This was the first time in history that a Candle Dragon had ascended to the top of the Hidden Dragon ranking. Initially, some of the Illumination dragons who did not approve of Su Zimo had no objections, afraid that Su Zimo would not join the Illumination dragon lineage. You guys can disperse first. At this moment, the 4 elders of the dragon tribe descended from the sky and spoke to the surrounding dragon tribe members. Long Mo, stay behind. Elder 4 of the Illumination dragons had a gentle expression as he smiled at Su Zimo and said. The group of Long Li left. Su Zimo and the 4 dragons were the only ones left in the Dragon Blood battlefield. Long Mo, what's the name of the dermic art you released just now with a gray mist in your palm? Elder 4 dragons asked. Baron, Su Zimo did not hide anything. Release it again, and let us take a look. The winged dragon elder was rather curious. Or rather, he could not believe that the power of a void reversion dragon's dermic art could affect existences of their level. Su Zimo flipped his palm, and a gray mist appeared in his palm. At this distance, the 4 dragons could sense it even more clearly. The elder of the winged dragon tribe reached out a finger and gently touched the gray fog. His finger had just touched the ball of gray mist when he withdrew it. Psst. The winged dragon clan elder sucked in a breath of cold air. He looked at the other 3 dragon clan elders and nodded. True enough. The power of this spell could even affect them. Earlier on, the elder of the winged dragon lineage had only made contact with it for 1/10 of a breath's time at most, yet he had lost dozens of years of his lifespan. Furthermore, it was irreversible and irreversible. The dozens of years of his lifespan had completely disappeared. Put it away quickly, the elder of the winged dragon clan urged. He didn't know why, but when he looked at the gray mist, he felt his heart skip a beat. Where did you learn this spell? The dragon's elder asked. Su Zimo said lightly, a friend taught me. Can this spell be imparted? The eyes of the elder dragons flickered as he asked. Even though they had already become the elders of the dragons and possessed lofty statuses and monstrous combat prowess that could even contend with Mahayana stage patriarchs, they still couldn't help but be tempted by such a spell.
Sorry, I can't.
Su Zimo shook his head and refused without hesitation. Dayu had once reminded him that he could not impart the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness to anyone else. Su Zimo had never forgotten Dayu's words. The hornless dragon elders and winged dragon elders revealed looks of regret. Only Elder 4 of Illumination Dragon had a calm expression as he nodded to Su Zimo, as though he understood Su Zimo's intentions. The dragon's elder retracted the flash of passion in his eyes and said in a deep voice with a sullen expression, Long Mo, as a member of the dragons, you should have handed over this dermic spell since you cultivate the cultivation techniques of the dragons and enjoy the primordial divine spring. Su Zimo frowned. This was clearly a demand for repayment, and disgust rose in his heart. The primordial divine spring had indeed saved his life and brought his true body of the dragon race back to life. However, he had also joined the dragons. If he was asked to do anything because of this, he would only be disgusted. Given Su Zimo's personality, he would rather not have the true body of the dragons than submit. There were some things that were his bottom line, and he could not compromise. No. This time round, Su Zimo rejected even more thoroughly, and his tone turned colder. The dragon's elder narrowed his eyes. A junior at the Void Reversion realm among the dragons actually dared to reject him and speak to him in such a manner? Furthermore, this junior was an outsider with an impure bloodline and an unknown identity. Junior, say that again. The dragon's elder asked again with a dark gaze. Long Zhong, what are you doing? Elder 4 of the dragon's candle dragons pulled Su Zimo behind him, and the gentleness on his face disappeared. He glared at the elder Chio dragon with a sharp gaze. That dermic spell is powerful. If he hands it over to the dragons, we dragons will become stronger. That's not too much to ask. The dragon's elder Chio dragon called Long Zhong said indifferently. Elder 4 harumphed coldly. Of course, it's good if this child is willing. However, if he's unwilling, you, me, and all the other dragons can't force him. When he heard that, Su Zimo was touched. No matter what, the elder of the dragon's candle did not treat him as an outsider and protected him the entire time. Why are you siding with him like this? Long Zhong frowned slightly and asked in a deep voice. Elder 4 of the dragon's candle sneered. This has nothing to do with favoritism. Long Zhong, you're already so old, and yet you're forcing a junior to hand over his cultivation technique. Do you have any shame? Long Zhong was speechless, and his expression darkened completely. Elder Chio Dragon was a middle-aged beauty. At that moment, she shook her head as well. Long Zhong, you've gone overboard for this matter. Although I want to cultivate that dermic spell as well, I won't force this child. Alright, everyone, stop arguing. Eldering Dragon stood out and tried to smooth things over. Long Zhong might have spoken harshly in a moment of panic. He doesn't have any ill intentions. It better be, Elder 4 of the Dragon's Candle said. We've already decided that Long Mo will be the young master of the Illumination Dragon's lineage and will occupy the title of Candle. Some old fogies better not have any designs on him. Humph. Long Zhong could not take it anymore and left with a flick of his sleeves, vanishing before long. It's fine, don't bother about him. Elder 4 of the Dragon's Candle turned around and patted Su Zimo on the shoulder. That fellow must have gone senile. Thank you, Elder 4. Su Zimo bowed in gratitude. This time round, it was all thanks to Elder 4 of the Illumination Dragons that he was saved. Otherwise, given his personality, there was a high chance that he would end up in a tragic state if he were to argue with Elder Chio Dragon, and his true body would be crippled once more. Right? Was that essence spirit secret skill of yours also given to you by that friend of yours? Elder Chio Dragons asked curiously. Yes, Su Zimo nodded. What's the name of that essence spirit secret skill? Elder Chio Dragons asked again. Reverse scale. The three elders were slightly stunned when they heard that word before a look of realization flashed through their eyes. Reverse scale. Reverse scale. Anyone who touches it will die. Eldering Dragons murmured softly and nodded. No wonder it's so domineering. Elder 4 of the Dragon's Candle pondered for a moment before reminding, Long Mo, this barren dermic spell and reverse scale secret skill are too, a little powerful. In the future, it's best not to use them when fighting against other dragons in the Dragonbone Valley. Chapter 1093. Dragonbone Valley. Less than a month after the battle between Su Zimo and Long Yang, the Illumination Dragon Elder appeared and conferred Su Zimo as the young master of the Illumination Dragon lineage. He gave him the name Long Zhu. After another half a year, Su Zimo had already integrated into the Dragonbone Valley completely. Firstly, the battle half a year ago made him famous and obtained the recognition of many dragons, especially the Illumination Dragon lineage. Secondly, the status of the young master of the Illumination Dragons was far above that of the other dragons. Thirdly, Su Zimo had already become the number 1 of the Hidden Dragon ranking. Another point was that Long Yang, who had already fallen to second on the Hidden Dragon ranking, did not become enemies with Su Zimo after his defeat. Instead, he became extremely close to the latter. Every time someone wanted to challenge Su Zimo, Long Yang would take the initiative to stop them. In the past half a year, all the dragons that fought Long Yang were defeated. If they could not even defeat the second on the Hidden Dragon ranking, there was no need to challenge the top. It was not only Long Yang. Long Shi of the Illumination Dragon lineage would often run to the Illumination Dragon lineage as well. Furthermore, she had changed from her violent temper and became much gentler, causing the dragons to click their tongues in wonder and envy. However, Su Zimo found it difficult to bear. Even if this body was the true body of a dragon, he had no intention of becoming Dao companions with dragons. He refused to agree to the marriage alliance that the Illumination Dragon's elder urged him to. Annoyed by the urging, he went into seclusion and refused to come out. In the blink of an eye, 10 years had passed. Bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley. Morning. The sun rose and rays shone on the ancient temple, illuminating a black-haired cultivator. Su Zimo opened his eyes slowly and exhaled deeply. 10 years ago, he had just entered the Void Reversion Realm and reconstructed his body. 10 years later, he was already at the peak of the mid-stage Void Reversion Realm. This cultivation speed could be said to be quite terrifying. The higher one's cultivation realm was, the more difficult it was to raise it. When Su Zimo was in the nascent soul realm, it took him 100 years to reach the peak of the mid-nascent soul realm from the early nascent soul realm. However, it only took him 10 years to reach the Void Reversion Realm. When he was in the nascent soul realm, Su Zimo not only had to cultivate, but he also had to constantly nurture Qinglian. But now, the creation Qinglian had disappeared, leaving only a bare lotus throne and 54 seeds of Qinglian, no longer needing the primordial spirit to nurture them. As a result, Su Zimo's cultivation speed increased greatly. Secondly, when he was at the nascent soul realm, he cultivated the top cultivation techniques of the immortal and Buddhist sections. At the Void Reversion Realm, he cultivated the top cultivation techniques of the immortal, Buddhist, and fiend sects. Furthermore, the demonic sex cultivation technique came from a demonic sex half-martial ancestor. Amongst them, there was utterly no need for Su Zimo to comprehend the comprehensions and experiences within the Tao Heart Devil Seed scripture. After devouring the memories of a half-martial ancestor of the fiend sex, it was as though he had been enlightened. He could directly comprehend the essence and profundities of the fiend technique. With that, he was already at the peak of the mid-stage Void Reversion Realm in just 10 years. He had been stuck at this realm for a month. Su Zimo could vaguely sense a bottleneck. If he continued to cultivate in seclusion at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley, he might not be able to break through this bottleneck even after spending another 10, or even dozens of years. Furthermore, he wanted to move after a long period of silence. Now that he had returned to the North region, he could visit some old friends there. After bidding farewell to Monk Yuan Bei and the red-headed ghost, Su Zimo left the Dragon Burial Valley and headed towards the capital of Great Zhou. This time round, there was no longer a need for him to hide after returning to the North region. The impact of the battle in the Dao inheritance ground was immense. Later on, the D clan's half-martial ancestor was severely injured, Chaos Essence Sex mighty figure died, and a few conjoint body mighty figures of Super Sex fled the Dragon Burial Valley in defeat. The impact on the entire cultivation world was even greater. At the very least, up till now, no sect dared to target him under the guise of killing an alien race. There was also no conjoint body mighty figure like the Dharma Daojun, who dared to attack him rashly across major cultivation realms. Except for fights of the same cultivation realm. Of course, in the eyes of many cultivators, Su Zimo had already fallen from his pedestal. Without the divine phoenix bone, body, and creation Qinglian, Su Zimo could not even be considered a paragon in the eyes of the cultivators. Even if he could return alive, he would vanish into the crowd and was not worth mentioning. At that moment, no one realized that the monster incarnate that once caused countless paragons to tremble in fear had already been reborn. After entering the territory of Great Zhou, Su Zimo was in no hurry. He advanced and surveyed the mountains and rivers along the way. All these years, under the governance of Ji Yaoxue, Great Zhou was even stronger than before. The country was strong and the citizens lived in peace. More than 100 years ago, the allied army of Great Shang, Great Xia, and Great Yu invaded Great Zhou and was buried by Su Zimo in Songlang mountain range. After that battle, the destiny of Great Zhou had already strengthened. Su Zimo was happy for Ji Yaoxue as well. Although the two of them were fated, they were not on the same path at the end of the day. As the Empress of Great Zhou, Ji Yaoxue naturally wanted to create a strong dynasty and usher in a peaceful era. However, Su Zimo had to cultivate continuously and pursue that ethereal great Tao so that he could catch up to Daiyu. Even so, Ji Yaoxue had an extremely important position in Su Zimo's heart. He could not forget the way Ji Yaoxue looked at him before he condensed his chi back then, without any hint of contempt. He could not forget the sky treasure badge that Ji Yaoxue gave him. More than that, he could not forget that 100 years ago, there was a woman who would brave the dangers to come to the Dragon Burial Valley every year to pour her heart out. If not for Ji Yaoxue, he would not even have been able to see Su Hong for the last time. Su Hong was his elder brother. Back then, Glass Palace hunted him down. Nobody dared to have anything to do with him, much less take in Su Hong. Ji Yaoxue was the only one who risked her life to bring Su Hong out and hid him in the capital of Great Zhou for 20 years. Su Zimo remembered all of that friendship in his heart. Perhaps he might not have anything to do with Ji Yaoxue in this lifetime. However, as long as he was alive, he would ensure her safety for the rest of her life. Before long, Su Zimo suddenly stopped in his tracks. Not far away, there was a layer of dark clouds that was formed by extremely heavy grievous qi and did not dissipate. Su Zimo moved and rushed over. It didn't take long for him to arrive. This was an average-sized village with about 40 families. At this moment, corpses were strewn all over the ground in the village. Every single corpse was rotten and filled with poison boils. There was a huge hole in their abdomens, and the blood that flowed had long dried up. Every corpse's eyes were wide open, and they died with grievances. Their deaths were miserable, and it was a shocking sight. The blood was all black. Frowning slightly, Su Zimo released his spirit consciousness and enveloped the entire village. There were more than 100 people in the village. Be it men or women, old or young, all of them were dead without a single survivor. Their deaths were similar. Poison boils grew on their bodies and their blood turned black. There was a huge hole in their abdomens, as though they were torn apart by something. That did not seem like the doing of demon beasts. However, Su Zimo did not sense any aura left behind by cultivators on those mortals either. Those mortals died in a strange manner. Su Zimo's expression darkened. This was something that happened in the mortal world and had nothing to do with him. However, when he saw those defenseless mortals meet with such a calamity, he could not help but recall the calamity that the citizens of Yen country suffered in the past. That scene strengthened his resolve to establish his Tao. Chapter 1094. 3 gigantic spirit vessels flew above the territory of Great Zhou. On each spirit vessel were close to 100 cultivators with powerful auras and might. Among them, there were more than 10 void reversions on each spirit vessel, and the rest were Jining Jinjuan. No matter where they were, this was a force that could not be ignored. The 3 spirit vessels had majestic auras, and each of them had a gigantic flag with the words Great Xia, Great Shang, and Great Yu written on it. On the spirit vessel in the middle, 3 cultivators stood side by side. They had a dignified aura between their brows and were incomparably noble. It was clear that they had been in positions of power for a long time. If any cultivators in the capital of Great Zhou caught sight of the 3 of them, they would definitely be shocked. The 3 cultivators were the emperors of Great Xia, Great Shang, and Great Yu. The emperors of the 3 dynasties had arrived personally in the territory of Great Zhou. This piece of land is truly not bad. It's filled with talents and fortune. Right then, a voice sounded from behind the emperors of the 3 dynasties with a hint of playfulness. The 3 emperors shuddered and dodged immediately, opening a path. A green-robed cultivator strode over. He was at the void reversion realm, and his lips curled into a sinister smile as he slowly ascended the bow of the ship. Initially, the emperors of the 3 dynasties still had a dignified aura. However, When they saw this person, they lowered their heads slightly and greeted respectfully. "Master?" The green-robed cultivator stood against the wind and passed by a bustling city. Looking down at the dense crowd of mortals beneath his feet, a ferocious look flashed through his eyes as he flicked his sleeves gently. Patches of black light sprinkled down like raindrops, slanting on the ground. "Go on, go on." The green-robed cultivator smiled gently and murmured, "I know you guys are hungry. Go and eat up these ants and enjoy yourselves." In the city, the pedestrians walking on the streets felt their faces wet and touched it instinctively. His fingers were stained with some black liquid that looked like ink. "What the hell? It's raining black?" A passerby hurriedly passed by, wiping his face as he muttered to himself. Nobody cared. Nobody noticed the 3 spirit vessels that were shuttling through the clouds above the city. On the spirit vessel, the emperors of the 3 dynasties looked at the black spots of light falling from the green-robed youth's sleeves. A look of fear flashed through the depths of their eyes. "Master, don't worry. The land of Great Zhou will soon be under your control." The emperor of the Great Xia dynasty had a humble expression as he smiled obsequiously. The emperor of Great Shang said in a low voice, "Master, the patriarch of Great Zhou died from exhaustion, and there's no Dharma Daojun in Great Zhou. The few of us are enough to occupy the capital of Great Zhou. But I heard that the #1 sect in the Great Zhou dynasty, Misty Peak, has a transcendent stage demon beast. This, hee." The green-robed youth chuckled and said, "What are you afraid of? That beast can't even protect itself. Master has already brought people over. Master is wise." The 3 emperors hurriedly flattered him. "Fellow Daoist, don't worry. Elder son of Dragon Tiger sect has already arrived in the capital of Great Zhou. Even if there's a Dharma Daojun, he won't be a match for Elder Sun." A muscular void reversion stood out and looked at the green-robed youth respectfully. With the Dao Lord of Dragon Tiger sect, one of the 10 upper sects of the North region, present, nothing will go wrong. The green-robed youth looked at the Dao being of Dragon Tiger sect and smiled. "Chihu Daoran, how's the power of the golden silkworm?" When he heard that, Chihu Doran's gaze suddenly burned as he grinned. "It feels great. My combat strength has at least doubled. Thank you for your help, fellow Daoist."
Ha!
The green-robed youth reared his head and laughed with a hint of mockery in his eyes. Su Zimo stayed in the village that was filled with corpses for a long time, but did not find any clues. The mortals died tragically, and the black blood in their bodies seemed to have been poisoned. However, there was a huge hole in the abdomens of the mortals, as though they were torn apart by some demon beast. However, he did not discover any demonic qi near the village. Without any clues, Su Zimo set a fire and burned the corpses to prevent diseases from spreading before continuing towards the capital of Great Zhou. A day later, there was a city not far ahead that was shrouded in death qi. There were even faint wails and screams coming from the city. Frowning, Su Zimo sped over and arrived above the city before long. When he looked down, he could not help but gasp. Corpses were strewn all over the city. Every single corpse had poisonous boils on their bodies and a bloody hole in their abdomens that flowed with black blood. It was exactly the same as the mortals who died in the village previously. None of the hundreds of thousands of mortals were spared. Some of them did not die and were still struggling on the spot. Their consciousnesses were blurry, and they seemed to be enduring endless pain as they rolled and wailed on the ground. In a flash, Su Zimo arrived beside one of them. He scanned with his spirit consciousness and discovered that there was a wisp of spirit qi in that person's body. He was a qi refinement warrior, but his cultivation realm was low. If not for that wisp of spirit qi, he might not have been able to hold on till now. Su Zimo hurriedly took out a few bottles of elixirs from his storage bag and stuffed them into the mouth of one of them without any explanation. Those elixirs were perfect-grade elixirs that could cure hundreds of poisons. However, after consuming those elixirs, that person's condition did not improve at all, and he continued to scream in excruciating pain. Su Zimo was helpless against this situation as well. How could this be? Su Zimo shook that person's body and asked in a deep voice, "What's going on?" Perhaps it was because of the elixirs that the person regained consciousness and murmured softly, "Black rain, black rain, black rain?" Su Zimo frowned. Right then, his gaze swept across and landed on that person's abdomen. That person's clothes were already torn, and a fist-sized blood blister protruded from his exposed abdomen. Immediately after, the blood blister burst with a poof. A black snake-like thing crawled out. It was as long as an arm and had no nose, no eyes, and no ears. However, it had a ferocious beast mouth that could tear apart flesh and blood. The inside of the mouth was filled with sharp fangs.
Squeak, squeak.
The demon beast shrieked and tore open that person's abdomen. As though it sensed something, it suddenly turned around and opened its mouth, spitting out its scarlet tongue as it charged towards Su Zimo. Beast. Su Zimo's eyes flashed coldly as a scarlet flame shone from his fingertip, enveloping the black demon beast instantly. Enveloped by the immortal Dao fire, the demon beast turned into ashes without making a sound. He had never seen such a demon beast before. In fact, he could not sense any demonic chi from that demon beast. Su Zimo's expression darkened. This was clearly not a natural disaster. There was a high chance that it was man-made. The lives of those mortals had nothing to do with him. However, such inhumane methods still caused a strong killing intent to surge in his heart. Apart from Di'in, it had been a long time since he had such killing intent. Chapter 1095. Su Zimo remained silent as he looked at the people who were still struggling and screaming. Although his combat strength was strong, and he was once the most terrifying monster incarnate in Tianhuang mainland, he was helpless against this. There was no way to save these people. The only thing he could do was to end their pain.
Poof, poof, poof.
Su Zimo flicked his fingertip gently and released streams of dermic powers, killing those mortals who were in so much pain that they wished they were dead. Thereafter, he released the immortal Dao fire and burned the entire city to ashes. Su Zimo moved and continued forward. Before long, his gaze shifted and he caught sight of a group of cultivators speeding not far ahead, as though they were discussing something. "Have you heard? The patriarch of Great Zhou is at the end of his lifespan and has already passed away."
Ah.
The Dharma Daojun who established the Great Zhou dynasty? That's him. To think that he would have lived for so long even though he had just died. I heard that if not for the patriarch holding down the fort in the capital of Great Zhou would have been annexed by the other 3 dynasties a long time ago. Su Zimo's ears twitched, and he heard the contents of the cultivators' discussion clearly. He frowned slightly, with a hint of doubt in his eyes. He had heard of the patriarch of the Great Zhou dynasty. Back then, the reason why Nian Qi and little Crane Qingqing were able to enter the intermediate ancient battlefield was because the old immortal Crane and the patriarch of Great Zhou worked together to open up the spatial node of the ancient battlefield. The patriarch was already in his twilight years, and it was only logical that he had yet to break through and his lifespan was exhausted. What puzzled Su Zimo was that this was something that should have been extremely secretive. How did everyone know about it? If the 3 dynasties heard about this, it would be detrimental to Great Zhou. Without further ado, Su Zimo split open a pair of dermic power wings behind him and lightning coiled around his body. Turning into a bolt of purple lightning, he surpassed those cultivators instantly and disappeared into the voids. The capital of Great Zhou. The palace was cold and cheerless. It was a woman dressed in a light yellow robe. Her black hair was like a waterfall, and her appearance was extremely beautiful. Although she did not wear any makeup or pearls, her noble aura was overwhelming. The woman gently stroked her forehead and gently leaned against the back of the chair. Her eyes were tightly shut, and there was a heavy tiredness between her brows, as if she was taking a nap. A middle-aged man walked in from outside the hall. He looked at the sleeping woman and sighed softly. During this period of time, The ancestor had passed away, and the pillars of the entire dynasty had collapsed. All of the heavy burden had fallen on this woman's shoulders. Because this woman was the current emperor of the Great Zhou dynasty, Ji Yaoshu. This kind of pressure, let alone a weak girl, even a 7-foot-tall man like him would find it hard to bear. Over the past few days, the news of the old ancestor's death had somehow spread out, causing the entire Great Zhou dynasty to become restless. After hesitating for a long time, the middle-aged man said softly, reporting to the emperor, "All the kings have arrived at the royal city to offer their condolences."
Yes.
Ji Yaoshu moved and woke up from her dream. She let out a long sigh and nodded. "Uncle Mingze, thank you for your hard work." "It's nothing." The middle-aged man was none other than perfected Lord Mingze, who was once the emperor of Great Zhou. Right now, he was already at the Void Reversion Realm. Ji Yaoshu headed outside. She was the one who wanted the kings to offer their condolences this time round. Since the news of the old ancestor's death had already been leaked, she might as well take advantage of the situation and gather the kings of the Great Zhou vassal states here to teach them a lesson. The two of them headed towards the depths of the palace where the old ancestor of the Great Zhou dynasty was buried. The kings had arrived as well. Right then, a beautiful figure sped over at an extremely fast speed with an anxious expression. It was the former commander of the White Hawk Guards and one of the current commanders of the Imperial Army, Bai Yuhan. After more than 100 years, Bai Yuhan had already cultivated to the nascent soul realm. "Yuhan, what's wrong?" Something major must have happened for Bai Yuhan to be so anxious. However, Ji Yaoshu was still calm as she asked in a deep voice. "Emperor, something bad has happened." Bai Yuhan panted slightly. "The spirit vessels of the 3 dynasties are approaching the royal city. The emperors of the 3 dynasties have gathered, and there are 10 void reversions. There are more than 200 Jinying, and they claim to be here to offer their condolences." Ji Yaoshu's expression changed. "What?" Dao Being Mingze was shocked and exclaimed. The fact that the emperors of the 3 dynasties had entered the Great Zhou dynasty at this moment with such powerful cultivators meant that they were definitely here with ill intentions and were not purely here to offer their condolences. Initially, the emperors of the 3 dynasties did not dare to enter the capital of Great Zhou with the patriarch, the Dharma Daojun, holding down the fort. But now that the patriarch had passed away, the emperors of the 3 dynasties had arrived immediately. "Emperor, let's leave first before it's too late," Bai Yuhan persuaded with a worried expression. Dao Being Mingze pondered for a moment and nodded as well. "There are less than 10 void reversions in our capital combined. I'm afraid we won't be able to defeat them. Commander Bai is right. We should avoid them for now." "Avoid?" Ji Yaoshu gave a self-deprecating laugh and asked instead, "Where can we avoid?" "To Misty Peak." Dao Being Mingze said in a deep voice, "The old immortal crane is holding down the fort in Misty Peak. As long as you have the support of the old immortal crane, you can lead the army of cultivators to make a comeback and reclaim the capital." Ji Yaoshu shook her head. "The foundation of the Great Zhou dynasty is here, the capital of the Great Zhou dynasty is here, and the citizens of the Great Zhou dynasty are here. Anyone can retreat except for me. I'm the Empress of Great Zhou." The kings were all in the palace. If Ji Yaoshu retreated, the Great Zhou dynasty would be destroyed as well. "Send a message to Misty Peak and request for Senior Crane to provide reinforcements." Ji Yaoshu took a deep breath and a resolute expression appeared on her face. "Gather all the void reversions and Jinying in the capital and have them rush over as soon as possible. The other party is merely a void reversion and Jinying. As long as we can hold on and wait for Senior Crane of Misty Peak to arrive, all the cultivators of the 3 dynasties will be buried here." "Understood." Bai Yuhan replied in a deep voice and withdrew a spirit crane from her storage bag. She wrote a few words on it and released it. At the same time, perfected Lord Mingze released spirit cranes one after another and gathered all the void reversions in the capital. Deep in the palace, in front of a tomb, the kings stood side by side with solemn expressions. Before long, Ji Yaoxue led many cultivators over. 9 void reversions and 37 Jinying Jinjuan followed behind her with a terrifying aura. What's going on? The king's heart skipped a beat. All of them knew that the Empress had called them over to give them a warning. However, they did not expect the Empress to create such a huge commotion. Marquises, if you're done with your condolences, please return. When Ji Yaoxue arrived, she did not exchange pleasantries with the kings and said directly. The kings were stunned. However, right after, some of the marquises reacted and bid farewell with cupped fists. The remaining marquises left one after another as well. Right then, a black cloud shrouded over from the skies not far away. The clouds rumbled and enveloped the entire capital of Great Zhou. I heard that the Patriarch of Great Zhou has passed away, and the Emperor of Great Xia is here personally to offer his condolences. The Emperor of Great Shang is here personally to offer his condolences. The Emperor of Great Yu is here personally to offer his condolences. The kings were shocked and looked in the direction of the voice. In the skies, 3 gigantic spirit vessels tore through the black clouds. One after another, figures stood on the spirit vessels and sailed over slowly with immense might. Chapter 1096. Although the cultivation realms of the kings present were not high, they were all people of high status and authority. They quickly realized something. It was clear that the emperors of the 3 dynasties had arrived personally with so many cultivators to offer their condolences. They were clearly here with ill intentions. If the empress could not withstand this calamity, the Great Zhou dynasty would most likely be divided today. Ji Yaoxue felt uneasy and her palms were covered in cold sweat. However, she maintained her composure despite the circumstances and was fearless. She must not panic. Once she lost her footing, everyone would be consigned to eternal damnation. The only thing she could do was to stall for time as much as possible. 3 gigantic spirit vessels docked above the crowd of cultivators.
Why?
You don't seem to welcome us, Empress? The Emperor of Great Xia smiled gently and asked loudly. If the 3 of you are here to offer your condolences sincerely, I'll naturally welcome you. However, if you have ulterior motives, Ji Yaoxue did not continue. However, there was a hint of murderous intent in her tone. Even against the armies of the 3 dynasties, she did not show any fear. Fufu. The emperors of the 3 dynasties exchanged glances and smiled with mockery in their eyes. If Ji Yaoxue was this calm before this, she might have been able to scare them. But now, victory was in their hands. Given the power and influence behind them, they could even flatten the upper sects and aristocratic families of the North region, let alone the Great Zhou dynasty. The spirit vessels dispersed, and the armies of the 3 dynasties descended slowly. Although they had received the news long ago, the cultivators of the Great Zhou dynasty were still restless. Not everyone could be like Ji Yaoxue, able to remain calm and collected in the face of such a terrifying battle. A green-robed cultivator stood in the crowd behind the emperors of the 3 dynasties. His gaze landed on Ji Yaoxue's face with a hint of amusement. The Emperor of Great Xia arrived before the tomb of the Patriarch of Great Zhou and shook his head gently, sighing. What a pity! What a pity! You died early and didn't get to see the destruction of Great Zhou. The expressions of the Great Zhou cultivators changed. This was an undisguised provocation. The 3 emperors bowed in front of the tomb of the Great Zhou ancestor, then returned to the front of the formation. They looked at Ji Yaoxue with half-smiles. Empress of Zhou, are you so calm because you're waiting for Misty Peak's reinforcements? The Emperor of the Great Xia dynasty suddenly laughed and asked. Ji Yaoxue did not say a word. The Emperor of Great Shang reared his head in laughter. To tell you the truth, you won't be able to wait. From today onwards, not only will the Great Zhou dynasty be eliminated, Misty Peak will also be destroyed. Hearing this, the Great Zhou cultivators could no longer maintain their composure. Ji Yaoxue's expression was cold as she said sternly, The 3 of you, I have 9 void reversions and more than 30 Jinying Jinjuan behind me. If we fight to the death, your 3 dynasties will suffer great losses as well.
Ah, hee hee.
The Emperor of Great Xia smiled leisurely. Emperor of Great Zhou, do you really think that you have the strength to fight against us? Flying Wolf goes. The moment he said that, a void reversion stood out from behind the Emperor of Great Xia with a ruthless gaze and murderous aura. Dao Bing Flying Wolf. Dao Bing Ming Zhe frowned. Dao Bing Flying Wolf was originally an itinerant cultivator of the North region. He was vicious and extremely savage and had been famous for many years. To think that he would submit to the Great Xia dynasty. Dao Bing Flying Wolf twisted his neck twice, and the sound of bones cracking could be heard from his body. For some unknown reason, under perfected Lord Mingzhe's gaze, Dao Bing Flying Wolf's neck and cheeks seemed to flash with silver light. It was as though there were earthworms crawling inside, and they disappeared before long. Dao Bing Flying Wolf strode forward and lunged towards Ji Yaoshua. You must have a death wish. Immediately, a void reversion stood out from behind Ji Yaoshua. Leaping up, he waved his sleeves and a flying sword sped forward, turning into a cold beam of light that pierced towards Dao Bing Flying Wolf. The sword was extremely fast. However, Dao Bing Flying Wolf was even faster. In a flash, he had already disappeared from everyone's sight. Immediately after, everyone felt their cheeks heat up. In midair, Dao Bing Flying Wolf appeared and tore the void reversion who attacked into 2, swallowing the latter's essence spirit and chewing it. Blood splattered on everyone's faces before they felt a warmth. One of the 9 void reversions of Great Zhou was already dead. Pissed. The crowd sucked in a cold breath. Dao Bing Mingzhe was shocked as well. Dao Bing Flying Wolf's combat strength was several times stronger than what he knew.
Clang.
Daoist Flying Wolf's arms shook, and a pair of cold claws appeared on his wrists. There were 4 dermic patterns carved on them. Supreme-grade Dao Bing dermic weapons. This was not common in the cultivation world of Great Zhou. Even perfected Lord Mingzhe only had a superior-grade Dao Bing dermic weapon. Kill. A strange silver glint flashed through Dao Bing Flying Wolf's eyes as he charged into the crowd. Dao Bing Mingzhe hurriedly retreated with Ji Yaoshua. The 3 void reversions attacked at the same time and released dermic arts and dermic weapons, forming a gigantic barrier that wanted to trap Dao Bing Flying Wolf within. However, Dao Bing Flying Wolf was too fast, and his movement technique was strange. In a flash, he passed through the layers of barriers and arrived before the 3 void reversions. Severed limbs flew everywhere and blood mist spewed out. In the blink of an eye, the 3 void reversions were dead. There were only 5 void reversions left beside Ji Yaoshua.
Die.
2 void reversions stood out and condensed their spirit consciousnesses without hesitation, releasing a spirit consciousness attack. On the side of Great Zhou, no one knew of Essence Spirit secret skills. Dao Bing Flying Wolf was fearless and condensed his spirit consciousness as well, colliding with the spirit consciousnesses of the 2 void reversions with a loud bang. Immediately after, the 2 void reversions grunted. A look of pain flashed through Dao Bing Flying Wolf's eyes as well. The 3 of them were injured at the same time when their spirit consciousnesses clashed. On the side of Great Zhou, another void reversion seized the opportunity to attack. With a cold flash, he slashed Dao Bing Flying Wolf's neck.
Clang.
The sound of metal clashing could be heard when the sword slashed, and sparks flew everywhere. Invulnerable? Perfected Lord Mingzhe's eyes widened. When did Dao Bing Flying Wolf's body become so strong? Even if the flying sword was only an ordinary middle-grade Dao Bing dermic weapon, it was impossible that it could not pierce through Dao Bing Flying Wolf's body. Another dermic art descended and struck Dao Bing Flying Wolf's chest firmly. However, it only sent him tumbling. Dao Bing Flying Wolf stood up once more, and his eyes shone with silver light. He grinned sinisterly and charged towards the few void reversions who attacked.
Poof. Poof. Poof.
Blood light surged. In less than 10 rounds, another 4 void reversions were killed by Dao Bing Flying Wolf. Ming Zhe was the only void reversion left beside Ji Yaoxue. Many Jining Jinjuan of Great Zhou retreated repeatedly, and 5 of them dared to advance. If even void reversions died one after another, it would be useless for them to advance. Dao Bing Ming Zhe felt chills run down his spine. It was only at this moment that he realized what a terrifying group of cultivators they were facing. Ji Yaoxue was disheartened. Great Zhou was dead. Chapter 1097. Something's wrong. Dao Bing Ming Zhe's expression was terrible. Although Dao Bing Flying Wolf was strong, it was impossible for him to be that strong. Furthermore, if Dao Bing Flying Wolf possessed such combat strength, why would he listen to the orders of the Great Xia dynasty? Ever since the destruction of the Great Qian Empire 10,000 years ago, the current 4 dynasties of the North region were no longer as strong and glorious as the empires of the past. Back then, there were 2 Buddhist monasteries in the Great Qian Empire. The strength of the empire itself was comparable to super sects. But now, the 4 dynasties were inferior to even the 10 upper sects and aristocratic families of the North region, let alone super sections. Given Dao Bing Flying Wolf's combat strength, he was more than qualified to join the upper sects. Why would he join the Great Xia dynasty? Perfected Lord Ming Zhe vaguely realized that the enemy Great Zhou was facing this time round might be much more terrifying than the 3 dynasties. How confident was the Emperor of 3 dynasties to come to the capital of Great Zhou personally? The Emperor of Great Xia smiled leisurely. Emperor of Great Zhou, why are the void reversions of Great Zhou so weak? The Emperor of Great Yu said coldly, Ji Yaoxue, more than 100 years ago, your lover Su Zimo killed 1 million people of the allied army of the 3 dynasties in Songlang Mountain Range. It's time for us to settle this score. Even though Ji Yaoxue knew that she would definitely die today, and that Great Zhou was about to perish, she no longer had any fear as she sneered. The armies of the 3 dynasties invaded Great Zhou and killed more than 1 million civilians wherever they passed. Those lowly commoners have a death wish for trying to stop the armies of the 3 dynasties. A ferocious glint flashed through the eyes of the Emperor of Great Shang as he sneered, Ji Yaoxue, Su Zimo is already a cripple, and his fate is unknown. This debt of blood can only be blamed on you. Ji Yaoxue's eyes dimmed when she heard that name. She had heard of the battle 10 years ago as well. His body was destroyed, and he lost the divine phoenix bone. Qinglian had many things to rely on. Even if Su Zimo could return, he might not be the invincible monster incarnate of the past. Such a blow was enough to destroy anyone. Ji Yaoxue looked into the distance and sighed internally. Zimo, I wonder if you're all right. In this lifetime, we're not fated to meet again. At this moment, an intense longing welled up in her heart. Like a carousel before death, scenes of the 2 of them interacting with each other appeared before his eyes. She was immersed in it, smiling faintly as her eyes gradually moistened. These scenes finally condensed into a figure that appeared in her blurry vision. His green clothes were upright, his figure tall and slender. His black hair fluttered about, and his eyes were clear. He was currently looking at her with a smile, his gaze gentle as he slowly walked over. Was he hallucinating? Ji Yaoxue sniffed and laughed at herself. She lowered her head slightly and took out a short sword, preparing to end her life here. At that moment, she suddenly realized that all the cultivators present were looking in that direction with widened eyes and shocked expressions. Su, Daoist Ming Zhe pointed into the distance and said those 2 words in disbelief, but he was unable to continue. Ji Yaoxue vaguely realized something and looked up suddenly. Not far away, a green-robed cultivator had truly appeared in her line of sight. In the blink of an eye, he had already arrived before her.
Could it not be an illusion? Who is that?
The Emperor of Great Xia asked with a frown. The green-robed cultivator was only at the void reversion realm. However, why did some cultivators look as though they had seen a ghost when they saw him? It's him. Chihu Daran of Dragon Tiger Sect narrowed his gaze and said in a deep voice, Dao being Araki Takashi, Suzimo. In the crowd, a cold glint flashed through the eyes of the green-robed young man as he murmured softly, interesting. To think that a big fish would be lured out just by dealing with some small fries. Fu, the Emperor of Great Yu sneered, if this was 10 years ago, this person would have been intimidating. But now, he's merely a cripple. Ji Yashua looked at the person in a daze and called out softly in disbelief. Zimo? Her voice trembled as she reached out slowly, wanting to touch Suzimo's face. However, she did not dare to, and her hand froze in midair. She was afraid that the illusion would disappear the moment she touched him. Suzimo arrived beside Ji Yashua and reached out, wiping away the tears at the corner of her eyes gently. Feeling the warmth of his palm, Ji Yashua no longer had any doubts. This was not an illusion. The person before her was Suzimo.
Suzimo sighed gently.
Someone bullied you. For some reason, the moment that sigh was said, all the cultivators present felt a chill run down their spines and their hairs stood on end. It was as though they were in immense danger and were targeted by some pure-blooded, ferocious beast. Even the green-robed young man frowned and felt his scalp tingle. He shook his head and chased that feeling away. Yes. Ji Yashua didn't say much. The majestic aura of an emperor disappeared in an instant, as if she had been greatly wronged. She only nodded and made a sound of acknowledgement. At this moment, no one had realized that this N had already announced their death sentence. What are you pretending for? Stop acting mysterious. Suddenly, Dao being Flying Wolf sneered, Dao being Araki Takashi, your past glory is now a thing of the past. The number 1 of the phenomenon ranking, the number 1 perfected lord, the number 1 Dao being, those titles have nothing to do with you anymore.
Oh.
Suzimo could not help but laugh. This time, he had only been in seclusion for 10 years. Even a nobody like Daoist Flying Wolf, who was unknown in the cultivation world, dared to jump out. Dao being Flying Wolf might have some reputation in the cultivation world of the North region, but he was far from being a true paragon. He had not even entered the Dao inheritance ground. In other words, he was not even fit to carry Suzimo's shoes. Of course, the reason why Dao being Flying Wolf dared to be so arrogant had to do with the fact that a half-martial ancestor expert attacked him 10 years ago. Logically speaking, Suzimo would definitely be reduced to the most ordinary void reversion after losing the divine phoenix bone, Qinglian, and his body being destroyed. However, no one knew that although Suzimo's physique and bloodline were weaker after he reconstructed Qinglian's true body, his combat strength was stronger than 10 years ago. Suzimo, you're here at the right time. The Emperor of Great Xia's gaze was cold as he said in a deep voice, more than 100 years ago, the blood debt of our 3 dynasties' army of 1 million cultivators will be repaid with your life.
Kill.
Dao being Flying Wolf growled, and his figure flashed. Suddenly, he lunged towards Suzimo, and a pair of sharp claws that were filled with blood chi extended from his wrists. Suzimo looked at Dao being Flying Wolf with a strange black glint in his eyes. Heavenly Fiend Eye. It was a visual technique in the Dao Heart Fiend Seed Sutra. Cultivators with weak Dao hearts and wills could be easily controlled and lose consciousness. Suddenly, Dao being Flying Wolf stopped in his tracks and stood on the spot in a daze, as though he had lost his soul. Although the Heavenly Fiend Eye did not have much lethality, it was an ancient fiend technique after all, and Dao being Flying Wolf could not defend against it.
Ah!
A series of exclamations sounded from the crowd. Just now, everyone witnessed how ferocious and powerful Dao being Flying Wolf was. The 8 void reversions of the great Zhou dynasty were all killed by him single-handedly. But now, Dao being Flying Wolf could not withstand Suzimo's gaze and gave up resisting after being glanced at. Right now, Dao being Flying Wolf stood on the spot motionlessly. Any Jining Jinjuan could kill him with ease, let alone Suzimo. Chapter 1098. It's a visual technique. As one of the upper sects, Chihu Daoren was the first to react and said in the crowd. Right then, Dao being Flying Wolf shuddered, and a strange movement came from his body. Silver threads appeared strangely on his cheeks. Thereafter, a silver light shone in his eyes. Su Zimo's expression changed, and a look of surprise flashed through his eyes. There was clearly an extremely strange power in Dao being Flying Wolf's body. With the burst of that power, he broke free from the control of the heavenly fiend eye. Su Zimo did not think too much about it. With a gentle flick of his finger, dermic powers condensed into a sword chi that shot out.
Poof.
Instantly, the dermic power sword chi entered Dao being Flying Wolf's glabella. Against ordinary void reversions, Su Zimo did not need to use any dermic arts. Even the simplest transformation of dermic powers could cause immense lethality with a casual sword chi. Although he was at mid-stage void reversion realm, his essence spirit was incomparably pure after being tempered by the top cultivation techniques of the immortal, Buddhist, and fiend sects. His spirit consciousness was more than 500 kilometers away and was comparable to the Dharma Daojun. His dermic powers were even more terrifying. This was the purest form of suppression with strength. Under countless gazes, Dao being Flying Wolf had just broken free from the control of the heavenly fiend eye and was about to regain his consciousness when his glabella was pierced by Su Zimo's dermic power sword chi. Dao being Flying Wolf's essence spirit was destroyed on the spot and his Dao dissipated. Although Dao being Flying Wolf was dead, the sudden additional power in his body confused Su Zimo. Clearly, without that power, Dao being Flying Wolf's combat strength would not have reached such a level. It was impossible for him to kill 8 void reversions of Great Zhou single-handedly. Go, kill him for me. The Emperor of Great Xia said fiercely, kill Araki Takashi, and you'll be famous throughout the world. That's right, he's alone. All of you, attack together. The Emperor of Great Yu hollered as well. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Immediately, 8 void reversions stood out from behind the 3 emperors. Strange silver lines appeared on their faces. Finally, a silver glint flashed through the eyes of the void reversions as they attacked at the same time. In an instant, more than a dozen flying swords pierced through the air. In midair, a few void reversions even conjured dermic arts that arrived one after another. This trick again? Su Zimo frowned slightly. The dermic weapons and dermic arts of those void reversions were not worth mentioning. However, the silver threads that appeared on their bodies had nearly doubled their strength, so their battle prowess had soared. Su Zimo had never seen such a method before. Of course, even if the combat strength of those void reversions doubled, there was nothing to fear. Su Zimo stretched out his finger and pointed forward. Rumble. Suddenly, a dark cloud appeared above the heads of the cultivators. It was as black as ink, and streaks of dazzling lightning bolts descended from the sky. Up to the sky, down to the earth. Lightning snakes and electric arcs constantly intertwined, forming a huge thunderstorm. The green-robed cultivator was shocked and retreated immediately. The cultivators of the 3 dynasties reacted as well and retreated. Rumble.
Boom.
The terrifying thunderstorm exuded a tremendous might, as though it could destroy everything, and engulfed the 8 void reversions that attacked instantly. Their flying swords, spirit weapons, and dermic arts were all enveloped by the purple thunderstorm. A moment later, the storm dissipated. There were only 8 charred corpses left on the ground. They were unrecognizable, and smoke billowed from their bodies. Their spirits were already destroyed. The dermic arts of the void reversions were devoured by the thunderstorm as well and vanished without a trace. Many flying swords and spirit weapons were scattered on the ground. None of them were intact. That dermic art was so terrifying that even dermic weapons could not withstand it and were shattered into pieces. After the purple thunder manual and green thunder manual fused, they formed a complete cultivation technique, the Great Void's Spirit Refinement Section. The original purple thunderstorm turned into the current thunderstorm as well. Its power was even more shocking. On the side of the three dynasties, the emperors of the three dynasties, many void reversions and Jining Jinjuan were shocked and trembled with deep fear in their eyes. The cultivators gulped. Didn't they say that Dao being Araki Takashi's body was crippled and his combat strength was greatly reduced after losing his creation, Qinglian and Divine Phoenix Bone? Didn't they say that Dao being Araki Takashi was crippled? What was going on before them? In the face of that dermic art, they felt as insignificant as ants. That was not a hallucination. Given Su Zimo's current dermic powers, if he were to release the thunderstorm with his full strength, he would not be much weaker than the Dharma Dao Jun. There seems to be a huge commotion, Su Zimo shrugged with a relaxed expression. His intention of releasing that dermic art was not to deal with the void reversions. His main intention was to see how powerful the dermic art was. After all, he had not fought anyone since he entered seclusion at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley. The green-robed young man frowned, and the initial contempt and mockery in his eyes had long vanished. Su Zimo's combat strength seemed to be different from the rumors. Given his strength, he was not absolutely confident that he could kill Su Zimo even if he attacked. Of course, he could still maintain his composure. Even void reversions like them could not suppress Su Zimo. In the capital of Great Zhou, there was still the Dharma Dao Jun of Dragon Tiger Sect. With such a huge commotion here, this Dharma characteristic Dao Lord must have sensed it. All of you, attack together. Right then, Chihu Daran hollered, Araki Takashi's body is destroyed and his reconstructed body is extremely weak. If you guys fight him in close combat, you'll definitely be able to severely injure him. His words jolted the cultivators awake, and they were enlightened. 10 years ago, Su Zimo lost his physical body and his essence spirit was not injured. Now that they were fighting against Su Zimo, they were definitely not a match for him. In the cultivation world, all cultivators knew some common sense. If a void reversion lost his physical body, be it through possession or purchase of void reversion body, it would be difficult for him to recover his former combat strength. In the past, Su Zimo's body was terrifying and he was invincible in melee combat. But now his body was his greatest weakness. At that thought, 6 cultivators suddenly darted out of the crowd. Silver glints shone in their eyes as they burst forth with all their speed and sped towards Su Zimo. Fellow Daoist, watch out. When Dao Bing Mingze saw that Su Zimo was motionless, he reminded hurriedly, they want to fight in melee combat. You've got to distance yourself. There's no need. Su Zimo smiled gently and channeled his spirit consciousness. Dermic powers surged within his body and gathered on his fingertip. He flicked his fingertip gently.
Shing, shing, shing.
Streams of dermic power soared chi burst forth at an extremely fast speed, piercing towards the 6 void reversions that were charging over.
Poof.
One of the void reversions could not dodge in time, and his head was pierced by the dermic power sword chi, causing his essence spirit to be destroyed. The other 5 void reversions slowed down hurriedly. One of them tilted his body slightly and dodged the sharpness of the dermic power sword chi. Before he could catch his breath, he caught sight of something from the corner of his eye and was scared out of his wits. The dermic power sword chi had already brushed past him when it suddenly stopped. As though it had a mind of its own, it turned around and stabbed towards the back of his head.
Poof.
Blood flashed. The void reversion fell to the ground and died. Chapter 1099. With Su Zimo's spirit consciousness, he could control his dermic powers with ease. In midair, the dermic power sword chi that shot out was filled with spirituality as though they were alive. They circled around the void reversions that were charging over and shuttled back and forth.
Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh.
Even if a void reversion could dodge the first attack, he would not be able to dodge the second. Even if he could dodge the second attack, he would not be able to escape the encirclement of 2 or even multiple sword chi. The few void reversions stood on the spot and moved around. Their lives were already hanging by a thread, let alone close in. At that moment, the emperors of the three dynasties were pale with fright. Instinctively, they wanted to turn around and look at the green-robed young man. But soon, a voice echoed in the minds of the three emperors. "Don't turn back. If you dare to look at me, I'll kill you right now." The green-robed young man's voice was filled with cold and sinister killing intent. The emperors of the three dynasties shuddered and did not dare to make any unnecessary movements. The green-robed young man's expression darkened as he shifted his gaze towards Chihu Daoran beside him. His gaze was cold with a hint of doubt and killing intent. "Didn't you say that Dharma Daojun of Dragon Tiger Sect is in the capital of Great Zhou?" The green-robed young man sent a voice transmission with his spirit consciousness. "Where is he? Why isn't he appearing after such a huge commotion here?" Chihu Daoran's expression was terrible. Under normal circumstances, Elder Sun should have already arrived at the capital of Great Zhou. However, for some reason, the Elder Sun did not appear. In reality, the Elder Sun of Dragon Tiger Sect was close by. However, he did not dare to attack. That person at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley was still alive. In the current cultivation world, not many people dared to attack Su Zimo across major cultivation realms. Back in Dragon Burial Valley, a half-martial ancestor of Chaos Essence Sect was severely injured, and a conjoint body mighty figure died. According to the person in Dragon Burial Valley, he would not interfere even if Su Zimo died in a fight of the same cultivation realm. It could only be said that Su Zimo was not skilled enough. However, if Dharma Daojun were to attack, the nature of the situation would change. It was easy for him to kill Su Zimo. However, he and Dragon Tiger Sect would have to endure the wrath of a Mahayana patriarch. Even if it was a Mahayana patriarch in his twilight years, the Dragon Tiger Sect would not be able to withstand him. In the blink of an eye, the 6 Void Reversions who had just left the battlefield were dead. Chihu Daoran slightly clenched his fists. Under the gaze of the green-robed youth, he felt as if there was a thorn in his back. A bunch of trash. Chihu Daoran stepped forward and took out a huge saber from his storage pouch. He twisted his neck and made a series of cracking sounds. Golden threads actually appeared on his cheeks. It was extremely strange. As soon as these golden threads appeared on his cheeks, they quickly disappeared. However, in Chihu Daoran's eyes, there were balls of strange golden light. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat, and he frowned slightly. It was this strange method again. Furthermore, the golden threads were clearly of a higher level than the silver threads. After the appearance of the golden threads, Chihu Daoran's aura became clearly stronger. Right then, Ji Yaoshua exclaimed softly as well. "Dragon Tiger Sect?" Ji Yaoshua noticed Chihu Daoran's sect badge and said in a deep voice with a grim expression, "As one of the 10 upper sects of the North region, why would Dragon Tiger Sect participate in the fight between dynasties? For the past 10,000 years, the 4 dynasties did not have the support of the upper sects or aristocratic families. For example, in the Great Zhou dynasty, apart from some small sects and factions, the most famous ones were the 5 major sects including Misty Peak and True Fire Sect. This was not strange. It originated from the catastrophe 10,000 years ago. Back then, the Great Qian Empire was strong and had a strong foundation. There were 2 Buddhist monasteries guarding its territory, and the aristocratic families of the upper sects submitted one after another. Even so, a catastrophe descended, and the Great Qian Empire was reduced to ashes. Because of that, the 2 Buddhist monasteries were destroyed and dissipated from Tianhuang mainland. From then on, although 4 dynasties were developed in the former territory of the Great Qian Empire, there were no longer any upper sects or aristocratic families involved. It was imaginable that even super sects like the 2 Buddhist monasteries were destroyed because of the Great Qian Empire. The upper sects and aristocratic families were even more wary. There was almost a tacit understanding between the upper sects and aristocratic families. No one would have anything to do with the 4 great dynasties. But now, The fact that Dragon Tiger sect was participating in the fight between the four dynasties was equivalent to breaking the balance. That surprised Ji Yaoxue. Was this the intention of Dragon Tiger sect or the Void Reversion himself? Chihu Daran glared at Su Zimo and grinned. Dragging his gigantic thick saber, he burst forth with blood chi and charged towards Su Zimo with a bang.
Swoosh.
The wind howled. Chihu Doran's movement technique was more than twice as fast as the Void Reversion just now. Dragon Tiger sect was one of the 10 upper sects of the North region. The Dragon Tiger Sutra of the sect was even a superior body tempering cultivation technique in the cultivation world. Chihu Doran's physique and blood chi were not weak to begin with. With the help of the strange power derived from the golden threads, his speed had already reached its limits. Behind him, there were even traces of afterimages. Zimo, watch out! Ji Yaoxue exclaimed softly. The combat strength of this Void Reversion was clearly not on the same level as the Void Reversion just now. Su Zimo's expression was indifferent, and there were still no fluctuations in his eyes. Standing on the spot, he had no intention of retreating and flicked his finger gently, shooting out a sword chi.
Shing.
The sword chi tore through the air and pierced towards Chihu Doran's glabella. Chihu Daran was still in midair when he suddenly twisted his body and dodged the sword chi by a hair's breadth. He did not stop and continued charging forward.
Shing.
The sword chi turned around. Chihu Doran's figure flashed once more. If he wanted to maintain his forward speed, he would not be able to dodge Su Zimo's dermic power sword chi perfectly.
Poof.
The sword chi streaked across Chihu Doran's arm. An arrow of blood spewed out and scattered into the void. A gigantic sword wound appeared on Chihu Doran's shoulder and blood flowed profusely. Su Zimo raised his brow. Under normal circumstances, the sharpness of that sword chi was enough to sever Chihu Doran's entire arm. But now, it only left a wound on his body. With the help of that strange power, Chihu Doran's body was much stronger. Just now, his wound was still dripping with blood. However, in the blink of an eye, the wound had stopped bleeding and shone with specks of golden light. The flesh on both sides of the wound began to close in the middle and showed signs of healing. Interesting, Su Zimo narrowed his eyes. While he was in a daze, Chihu Daran had already closed in. He had a maniacal expression and a menacing gaze as he said coldly, "Araki Takashi, hand over your life." At this distance, he was extremely confident that he could sever Su Zimo's head.
Whoosh.
The thick saber in Chihu Doran's hands shone with 5 bedazzling beams of light. 5 dermic patterns, a perfect Dao being dermic weapon. This was extremely rare even among the 4 dynasties. The saber beam flashed and slashed down viciously. However, Su Zimo did not seem to be aware of it. Just as the thick saber was about to slash Su Zimo's neck, he suddenly reached out and grabbed the saber. He did not budge. Even though he was wielding the blade of the thick saber, he was completely fine. Su Zimo turned his head slightly and asked with a fake smile, "What are you trying to do?" "You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.